Okay, good evening. Welcome to the February 22nd Palmer Town Council meeting. The meeting tonight is to interview our two finalists for town manager. Before we start, we are going to just talk about a couple technical issues regarding the interview process. So I provided all of you interview questions. Just need to know how you would like to proceed tonight, if you all want to take turns asking a question, or if we want to just, I could ask the potential question, and then you could ask follow-ups as part of the questions, or we can just alternate back and forth. So what would you like to do?
Well, I'd like everybody to have the option to ask in any of the categories.
Right, so the first question, or the follow-ups to the questions?
The follow-ups.
So the
Follow-ups, right.
possible probes.
Yeah, because the probes is where we're all going to pick up on our own
Really no need to,
pieces.
Yep,
I don't need to read off a question. We have the questions here.
right, so, okay, so I'll do the broad category question, and then you guys
Yep.
can interject, and
Dive bomb.
so the follow-up questions don't necessarily have to be what's here. If somebody says something that you want more information on, you can do that, okay? And also, I want to make sure everybody saw that I'd asked Bernie to get budget materials
Right.
from each of the candidates, so those I sent out last night. And anything else we need to talk
No,
about?
and I'll jump in if I see that there's a question that I think needs to be put forward to clarify anything, just so that you have all the information to make the best possible choice.
Okay, so our first candidate is Carolyn Brennan, if you want to go get her, and perfect, thank you.
What? No. I'm just curious if I actually sent it. It was delivered. Oh, what the matter?
Just switch your name thing. No, your name thing.
Hello?
Hi.
Carolyn Brennan.
Whatever you want to do.
Nice to meet you, man. Nice to meet you too.
Pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, good to see you.
Hi, good to see you again.
See you again.
Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you. Ernie?
Shake my hand.
How are you?
Let you get situated.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. I was telling them I'm used to seeing you guys from up there, so. Very nice setup.
Well,
You look skinnier now, right, in person?
Yes, absolutely.
So thank you, Carolyn. We're happy to have you tonight.
too.
We're gonna start off with just having you tell us a little bit about yourself and why Palmer. What makes you interested in Palmer?
Great.
Okay?
Okay. So majority of my career has been in municipal government, and I've had a unique opportunity that I've sat in several different roles in municipal government, whether it was volunteering, finance committee, being an elected official as a select board member up until last year, as just a volunteer in general, being on building committees, and now a fire commissioner in Wilbraham. I just couldn't let go completely of when I left as a select board member. And also now still following the building of the senior center in Wilbraham. So that's where I've been. I'm entering the middle of my fourth year at Hadley. And I've learned so much in Hadley. It is a form of government with town meeting, open town meeting. We have 2 a year. And I think that the commute is part of it. The commute is 40 minutes long, and that's 8 hours out of my week. And I do have other things that I like to do, and it's been a lot. But really, I've had the opportunity to learn more about the difference between this form of government and the open meeting form of government. And really, in my opinion, it's a town administrator's dream to have this opportunity 10 minutes from your front door to be in this type of form of government. And I see the increase in efficiency, how things can move along more quickly. And so that's really why I'm here. I'm just very excited and grateful to be sitting here.
And what makes you believe that you would be successful here?
So I think, I think a lot of it is all of the different roles I've played. I know what it's to be sitting in your position, and I know what it's to be a volunteer, to be on the finance committee, to be making critical decisions. I think what I bring to the table is my ability to understand all of those perspectives, and most importantly, the residents. And I do develop a very good relationship with the residents and the employees. And I think that I've had a chance to explore Palmer a lot more, and I'm very intrigued by the uniqueness of Palmer. You are unique. You have the villages, and each having their own identity, and I think that's exciting for me. And I do see opportunities. Matt, when I saw you at MMA, what came out of your mouth stuck with me. You said, it's a really exciting time in Palmer. And that stuck with me. And I went, I don't know that I've ever heard that come out of a select board's mouth or even a resident say this is exciting times. And so I do believe that, driving around and seeing all the different opportunities, knowing full well there's challenges, but I think I can bring all of my experiences and my ability to work well and collaborate with stakeholders, residents, legislators, and you as the governing board.
What would you say would be a challenge that you would face when coming into Palmer?
So I don't think it's a huge challenge. It's just learning the difference in town meeting. Everything that I do to get ready for our 2 town meetings is consolidated really within a year and can happen throughout the year where instead of waiting. So it's, for me, it's to understand how the ordinances work in day-to-day management and the collaboration with the council. So I don't know that there's going to be a large learning curve. But there's time that it takes. And what I've learned is making changes, making suggestions, anything only can happen after you've met everybody, gotten to know the council, gotten to know your employees, gotten to know the residents. And you have to build up that trust. And I think that takes time. So it would be very irresponsible for me to say even to offer any changes or anything without really getting to know the community as well as I can. And to build up trust. I think that's the biggest part that's going to take the longest. That's the challenge. You have to trust me, the employees have to trust me, and the residents in the commercial entity has to trust me as well.
Thank you.
So from an outsider's viewpoint, looking into Palmer, what do you see as the challenges?
So it's a great question because I did, I read the master plan, I read the other reports, and there's some consistency in wanting to preserve that open space, but understanding that economic development is needed. And then understanding the uniqueness of the villages, and they each have their own identity, they each have their own characteristics, and how that fits in. I had a fun Saturday. My husband and I and my little poodle drove around Palmer, and just looking at all of your mills and all of those potential areas of revitalization. But knowing that, and I guess I'd never realized, even have lived here my whole life, 10 minutes away, how unique those villages are. And you don't, balancing that to be able to bring economic development in and wanting to maintain each village's own identity without that. I think it's threatening in communities to feel that economic development come in and change the landscape. So it's just thoughtful land use, and again, still needing to get to know what are the unique needs in Palmer. I've done a ton of homework. I was telling the screening committee, my little breakfast nook is Palmer. And so you can look at it all, but it's still, you still need to get to know the community in place.
Okay. Anything else?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
You had touched on gaining trust. How would you go about gaining your strategies to gaining that trust?
Honestly, the most important thing is follow through. If I make a commitment to do something, if a resident calls me If and if an employee comes in and says, I need help with this, I have made it a point to follow through as quickly as possible. I mean, there's a couple department heads that I meet on a regular basis, sometimes weekly. If they come in and they need something done, I will literally go over to my computer and start typing the email to whoever it is that they need me to be the in-between to get some information. That has been in my opinion, the most successful thing is quick follow through with everything. I get frustrated, and that's part of that form of government as well. Open town meeting is it's difficult to complete things. It takes a long period of time, and sometimes projects just can get left aside, and that's frustrating for me. So follow through and completion in bringing maybe not a solution to someone, but be able to listen and say, I'm working on it and I can't act on it right now, but I promise you. And my favorite thing is to say, please give me a nudge if you don't hear from me in a certain amount of time. I think that's what builds up trust.
So, exciting times here in Palmer.
You said it.
Exactly. And along that, though, comes along with there's a lot going on.
Yes.
There are a lot of projects going on. There's a lot of stuff that's going to fall on the town manager. What strategies do you take when you're juggling multiple projects at the same time?
Another great question. I think that is something I can bring to the table because I have juggled large projects at the same time, small projects, and you have to prioritize and you have to have good time management. And I think I have been able to take some complex problems that seemed overwhelming and be able to put them in much more reachable steps that again, you felt like you were accomplishing something. I'll give examples unless you want me to.
No,
an example in Hadley is we have an old, beautiful, beautiful brownstone, old school, gorgeous, right in the center of town. If you've been through Hadley, you've seen it. There used to be a music school there. That might ring a bell. Beautiful building. A lot of personal attachment to it. So similar to Palmer, you have several generational families. So there's grandparents who went to school there, they saw their kids do their rehearsal there, they went to graduations there, and so there's a lot of attachment to it. But you also have a part of the residents that aren't attached to that building and don't want to be maintaining this building because it's empty now. And so a committee was put together to do a survey and to find out what did the town want to do. This survey wasn't it was a great group of volunteers who really cared about that building, but you needed the balance of those who don't want to, I'm going to use the term save the building. They just get rid of it, let's just put up a park, put up some solar driveways or something. And so what we did was they proposed to the town, their recommendation to the select board was to we want to, what do you call it? I used it at the screening committee. Not maintain it, stabilize it. But it was going to be well over $1.5 million just to stabilize it. And so I could see, because I'm talking with different residents and employees, who I have to say is a lot of the employees are Hadley residents, who are saying, I'm not going to put $1.5 million into that building and not know what we're going to do with it. And so as I listened to what the residents were saying and all their stakeholders and constituents, I said, let's just do instead of just stabilizing it, let's get a study to come in, to have a firm come in and do different options, the private sector, private and public collaboration, or have the town keep it, but put a cost associated with it, give us real clear estimates of what it was going to cost. And that itself was not going to cost $1.5 million. It was $25,000 to have a feasibility study come in. And that passed at town meeting because people don't want to stabilize it if they don't know what they're going to do with it. The study was going to come in and say, here's your options. Here's how much it's going to cost. Now let the voters decide what they want to do with that. That, it wouldn't have passed. I've been in enough town meetings, and every town is different on what they will support and what they won't, but I knew this wasn't going to pass. But to get it to move forward, and that's always the goal, get it to move forward, That went through and it passed, and we've just started that feasibility study. So that will be able to go to the town. Another example of that is our DPW is, I mentioned in the screening committee, it's 2 used trailers that we got 30 years ago. And we are in the middle of, we just had the feasibility study done for that, and it's over $20 million. That's not going to pass at town meeting last year. I knew it. So I was able to go back to the engineer and say, what's the next step that we could do that could still keep it forward, moving forward? And they said, do a schematic design. That will tell you exactly what it's going to cost, much better than just the estimate that this level of a design would do. And that did pass. So right now we're in the process of hiring an OPM and then the designer to just start that process to get it going. So again, I felt a sense of completion, but I didn't feel like it was going to get stalled, which happens in a lot of committees. Projects get outdated, outpriced, and stall, and this will help keep it going. So those are two examples.
Great, thank you.
You hit on a lot of topics. We talked about management
I did
style.
last time, right?
We talked about project management, a little bits in
Yeah.
this time here. Are we moving into next topic? So, unfortunately, I've already asked you like all these questions, so I'm
Yeah, but
going
I'm
to
going to be
ask
more
you
succinct this time.
different questions, right? So every person's going to come in and say they're a collaborative worker,
Yeah.
right? So, in your experience, in your different roles that you've played, maybe most recently in Hadley, where's a time, or can you provide an example where you couldn't be as collaborative as maybe you like to be, and you had to really step into the weeds and take the reins?
So let me understand it a little better. So you're saying, can you just kind of,
So
Reword.
we talked about collaboration,
yep.
and I think one of the comments, can I refer to?
Yeah.
One of the comments you had made in a prior interview was, if you're not hearing from me, you're doing good.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that's always a good thing, personally. I can't speak to everybody's opinion on that. So I'm asking an example of where you couldn't be as collaborative and you really had to, like, what's your circuit breaker to go in and say, all right, I really need to, like, step into this situation?
So when I brought that up,
And I'm taking it out of context.
No.
so
But now
just-
I'd love to.
It was in reference to
Senior center.
interaction with, right,
Yeah.
senior center, interacting with staff, right.
Yes.
Staff management, right.
Yeah. So I can't think of a situation where I wasn't able to be collaborative. I guess
Maybe
I'm
more, I don't want to say aggressive, but assertive.
Okay, let me.
You had staff that needed additional support. Is that where
Yeah,
you're?
she's the political person.
So I'm sorry. I'm trying to flow where.
Yeah.
What do you? I'm not,
Not everything's going to be peachy, right? And you can
Oh,
wait for a management
probably once a day.
report.
Probably once a day. Yeah. Or more. Yeah. So let me reword it and see if I'm hearing it correctly. Is there a time where the collaboration wasn't working and I needed to just make a decision?
Yeah, that's good.
Now I gotta think.
Or step in and kind of redirect the department or the department head or something like that. It doesn't have to be like, Billy said something to Susie. It could be, just a,
Yeah, I'm not thinking of anything right now. I'm sorry. I'll think more on it.
Sure.
Maybe come back to it. Can we do that? Yeah.
Sure.
So how do you, what beyond collaborative? Because yes, we all use the buzzwords and we know that.
Yeah.
But as coming in as a new manager, what is your approach to? You talked about gaining trust and working with your team. So what steps do you take to do that? And in addition to that, like what is your thought process, or how do you conduct yourself as far as having your team be part of decisions, or at least even if they're not helping you to make a decision, aware of what's going on? So one of the things that I'm sure you probably heard, I'm assuming, like siloed, people being siloed. So how do you make sure that your staff isn't siloed, and I'm not just necessarily talking department heads, but all staff.
Yeah, no, it's I would say that is, and even how I handled it in Hadley or any other community, the first thing I have to do is get to know the staff. I have to sit down and talk with them and get to know them personally. I want to know more about them. I want to know, those initial meetings, what are the challenges that you're seeing? And I want to listen most of the time. I mean, you're never too old to learn, but I would say in the last 3 years, 4 years, I probably have grown the most in that area of really listening to my staff or even their support staff. I will definitely spend time talking with the support staff. We don't have a lot, so there's a lot of departments that are a department head and a part-time assistant. But I think you learn a lot about the employees and about the community. So I do, if I were to say what my first few months would be like, it would be spending time and talking with all of as many employees as I could. I would go to the library and ask if all the staff could be there, and I could sit and meet them and listen to them. And I always want to know what the challenges are. And then also, even like the senior center, have all of the staff there, meet with them, the DPW, and that's what I did in Hadley. I met with every department but collectively all of the departments. The DPW, I couldn't meet with all of them independently. So that is really, really important to me, is to get everybody to know personally. Through that is when I find about skill sets that aren't being utilized, and maybe later when we talk, I can talk about listening to people, what they do and what they've done in the past, and utilizing that to really help the town to tap into those skills.
I think that would be a good thing to hear about, because what we're trying to understand is your management style,
Yeah.
how you lead a team, and how you give feedback to people, how you draw out those skills. And I think everyone, you've been very straightforward in the importance of coming in without any preconceived notions and listening to people and understanding people. But then that's the first 6 months.
Right.
Hopefully you'll be here for 6 years.
Yep.
And so then once you get that information, you've had that opportunity to listen,
Working with them.
how do you implement to make sure that you're staying on top of things and that they understand what they need to be doing
Okay.
and holding them accountable?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
all those
so
areas.
let me, if it's okay, I will go into that example of this is how much time I take. I do try to touch base with everybody every day within the town hall. I'm very comfortable with the senior center. A lot of activity takes place and meetings take place at the senior center. But I think an example of where taking time to listen to an employee and what they've done in the past and what they've done and some of the challenge that they see in the town, our collector was getting to know her, but also have known her in the past that she had worked for an insurance company that insured cities and towns. They no longer do business, but she had come from that to the collector position in Hadley and lived in Hadley, but we had no one really overseeing insurance. It was the town administrator, it was under the town administrator, but with the level of things coming at you, to really go through insurance and understand it so that you are getting, is our deductibles too high? Where can we be saving? Where should we be doing the trainings? She said, I could do this for you. I could take over the insurance for you. And we talked more about it. And literally within the first year, we got her a stipend to become also the risk manager, to have that title. Literally the first year, she saved the town $30,000 because she could negotiate with our insurer because she knew the language. Most town managers and town administrators don't know the whole language of insurance. And she ongoing is saving us money because she coordinates all the trainings for OSHA, all the trainings. So is identifying those skills. And then also our treasurer was able to assist and become she has a title, the finance manager. She helps with all the data entry for the budget and preparing the documents that I will use and she will use. I meet with most of the departments, the bigger departments she meets with me. So it's identifying those skill sets. But I spend a lot of time with them, and I'm friendly, and I like getting to know people. And it's not, I don't hide in my office unless it's a crazy time. So I'm very visible to the staff, and it's absolutely an open door. Anybody can come up there at any point. If my door is closed, that's a different story. They know I'm in a meeting, but it is an open door policy at all times. That gets frustrating because sometimes I'll have two people sitting out on a bench waiting, but I just believe that's what I'm there for, is to help support them. And I'm always saying, what can I do to help? Is there any, if they're frustrated, what can I do to help? And I don't mean getting into the weeds with them, but trying to find some other support for them to help them during critical times.
So how do you address, or how would you address coming into this community and, one of the standard answers is typically, this is all, we've always done it this way, right? And so how do you deal with that? And also, how do you see, so you're hearing that from department heads, let's say, and then you have the council. So how would you use the council? What role does the council serve for you as a new town manager, I guess? So that's two parts.
There's a couple of questions in there,
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. When I came in there, there was a lot of independent purchasing of items. The copy machines and the printers were one example. And so I initially started to say, how much are you spending on that? It's frustrating that you guys have to keep buying toner from this company. You're buying it from this company. Another department's buying it from this company. It's a lot of money. We might be able to save some money. So it took some time, but inevitably I was able to get an audit done to look at the cost of everybody independently buying all their equipment versus leasing and having it be centralized. And it was a significant savings. And it takes time. I can't just throw it on and say, this is going to work much better. That is not the approach you can take. I think you need to have them a part of your exploring and say, look, here's how much it's costing. I think we should try this. And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. I have to be careful when I come in and say, well, in East Long Meadow we did it this way, or in Hadley, because I have to be careful not doing that. So that can be the other, you got to say, oh, I just got to hold that in. Even if at that moment I could be right, like the copy machines, you have to hold that in. You just have to hold that in. And so I'm very careful with that. And sometimes I'll say, you guys, I just have to say it, and I apologize. I just have to say it, that this is how it worked, and it was really good. So they've gotten to know it, and it can become a joke at times. But you can't do that right. You got to be careful. And so I'm very, very sensitive to that. It's always been done this way. Again, it's relationship building, and I do know how to build up relationships.
And role with council?
So this council, I see it very collaborative in the sense that there's a lot of talent here. And so I see the role is problem solving together when there's an issue. I'm going to tap into those resources. And also, I'm missing something.
Mark's is not talking about.
No, yeah.
So I definitely see it. My role is to provide as much information for the council as possible to make the decision that you feel is best for your constituents. So my role is, what do you need, and how I would want to know how much you want me to communicate with you to share information, because that's critical. Some when I was on the select board, it was fine. Some people just didn't. You don't have to bother me with that. I'll hear about it at the meeting. But others wanted to hear about it on an ongoing basis. And in Hadley, a returning select board member was really adamant about, I need a town administrator's report every single meeting. And it was really time consuming, and I kind of was like, oh, okay, I'll do it. And it ended up being really, really helpful. I put a standard report together and update it for each meeting, and it really has become it's become helpful. So, I've learned not to resist, because sometimes that information is really helpful. And then that's a weird word to resist, going to be pushed back on something. But I just see it as, I use this term and I don't mean it like you guys can't handle it, but I feel like there's the town manager, town administrator, it's there to protect you as well, to make sure that the information that may be going out, even if it's to employees or to the residents, is accurate. That if I hear misconceptions that this is what the council did, I correct it. And that's my job, is to be that steward for you and the community when I'm out there. And so when I say out there, out with the employees or out in the public. So that role is very, very collaborative. I don't see it as, what do you want me to do now? I don't see it as that. I really, and again, the talent is here, that I want to tap into that talent.
So how do you keep residents informed? You just brought that up, so it's probably a question down the road, but
Yeah,
since we're there
it's-
right now, yeah.
You know, that, and you know, we talk about it all the time when the town administrators and town managers get together. It really is it's just, we all know it's a different time in our history. We can't just say we've got to, you know, clean up the website and people, you know, that's the best way to do civic engagement. It's helpful. We need to have a good, easy document that they can search for things. But that's an extra effort for a resident, is that they have to go to the website. And when your population is aging, yes, you know, the population that is in their 60s to 70s are comfortable with a computer, but you still have a large population that still needs to get that information out to them. So we're careful with our Nixle. We have, I don't know if you have an equivalent here, where if there's whether it's voting or a special event that's coming, the residents can sign up and we text them a message.
Code Red. Yeah.
Yours
Yeah.
is called, okay, yeah, there's a couple different ones. So you can use that. And I suspect that your weekly is read more than the Republican for newspaper. I think it's finding out who reads, what are they reading the most. So I think it's identifying that.
So you did homework. So you know that the Journal is actually here in town, Turley Publications.
Oh, that's right. Yes, yep.
So I was just
That's right.
throwing
That's
it
right.
out
We
there.
thought, thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
so the local paper is actually here, and we as a council and as a town have a really good relationship with
I think
Turley.
that's key. Yes.
I'm not going to say anything poorly, but I mean, a little bit more representation, but I think it goes both ways, us communicating with them and them communicating with us. And I think that we can get more out to the public. You're absolutely correct.
It's a nice way of saying they should show up more.
So as a like my first major in college was journalism. So I know I'm a good writer, and I would, if that would be great to be able to provide that, just to develop those resources. It used to be a much stronger, especially with the city newspaper. You don't have the same reporters anymore. You used to have the
Correct.
same
It's all
reporters,
changed.
and you could just on the cell phone say, "Hey, can you guys? This is going to be a great event." I do develop a good relationship with our newscasters, and so it used to be when Beth Ward, I could text Beth and say, "I have a great event. Can you be here?" And she'd show up in 20 minutes. So I think it's developing those relationships with our media is really, really important, and I'm very comfortable doing that. So.
Awesome. Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of great things going on in Palmer. And if we can get those out to the public and let the people know, because a lot of people in this town, they don't know. And they think they do, but they really don't. And it is a lot of information correcting and chasing things down and things like that. So, and we do have a Facebook page. So the
That is
town of
great.
Palmer does have a Facebook
That's
page.
great.
That we do leverage. So.
What strategies do you use in Hadley currently to keep your residents informed? I know that Hadley, there's a lot, even though it's a bit of a smaller population, there's still a lot going on, and you have more of a transient population given the fact that there's a lot of students in the area. So given those facts, and maybe a little bit more complex than even we have here in Palmer, how do you keep people informed about what's going on?
I would say we do use the website. I still think it's not the most, I think there's better ways to do it. I don't know that we do it that great, to be honest with you. We try. I would say, and it's not just, I'm trying not to lean back on Senior Center World, but that is a great place to hit a big portion of the population is the senior center. So the DPW, when we were getting the word out on the DPW, that's where we focused a lot of our information. A lot of our information is in the tax collector's office, right on the counter. So there's lots of brochures about things that are happening in Hadley. So we take advantage of where are we going to see people on a regular basis, and it's the collector's office. It is the senior center. It's the library. So those are critical places where you're going to see more, I would say even more residents showing up. We certainly serve other communities in those buildings, but yeah.
As a council, we every once in a while, we haven't done it in a while since COVID, but we used to have just open sessions with the community. We would go to the library and have an open session, and anybody and everybody can come out and just ask whatever questions they wanted. How do you feel about that format, and would that bother you if we did that?
You guys, my thing is you guys need to do whatever you can. My only concern with that is open meeting law. You would not be able to.
Posted
No, they're
It's
posted.
posted.
Oh, they're posted.
Oh, it's
Okay.
posted. Oh, it's a posted a community engagement meeting that we have as a council, but
That's an interesting question. So if something comes up.
we write everything down. We take
Okay. So yeah,
everybody's
tell me more about it. Yeah, please.
right. So what we do is we'll just have an open meeting for anybody, pretty much just like an open meeting, just
Okay.
like you guys would have in Hadley, except for the residents. There's no agenda. The residents are there to voice their concerns and whatever they want to talk about to the council
Yep.
and to the town manager. And then from there, we write down all the concerns,
Oh,
and
that's
then we come
awesome.
back and we try to talk about them and come up with solutions
I think
to
that's awesome.
take care of those issues.
That's great.
It just brings a lot more transparency to the
Yes.
council, and it actually builds trust with the community. So, what are your feelings on that?
That's fantastic. That's great. Just that you could get that many people from the council to be able to want to do that. And it may not be the whole council all the time, but that's huge.
Pretty much everybody,
That's
yes.
We just do it as a
huge.
council meeting. We
Yeah, we
also
do it as
use
a
it as,
council.
we were using it as an opportunity, so issues that we knew were important at that point in time to either update, so we started actually doing updates on different things before we even opened it up to questions, because a lot of times, the people that were coming, those were the questions that they had.
That's wonderful.
yeah.
Good for you guys. That is great.
Move into finance.
Yeah, it was great.
Yes, I'll say move into finance.
So as far as finance, thank you for providing your budget
I
documents.
do have hard copies if you
That's
want.
fine.
I'd already copied them.
We'll take them because sometimes people like to look on
Yeah,
paper as
okay.
opposed to the file. But, so obviously we saw from your document how you present your budget, but specifically, I would be interested in, what is your role in putting that document together? So you touched on that your treasurer does a lot of the work on that budget, but how much do you actually do?
So, yes, and it's a team approach. So let me talk about the finance team a little bit, the in-house finance team. So we meet the assessor, the collector, myself, and the treasurer almost every Tuesday at 2:30. We meet. Where's things? How's revenue? What's happening? And certainly more so during periods of the time where our quarters are over and seeing where we're at, and we look at where we were at compared to last year. And once a month, I have a member of the select board and the finance committee join us to go over that as well. And it's two members that have been a part of the finance committee and the select board for a long time, so there's a lot of history that comes with it. So we all meet together, in that it is an incredibly talented group, and unfortunately, they're part of our succession plan because all at once in about 2 years, that whole group is going to be retiring. So we are putting a succession plan in place for that. But so our Linda is our finance manager, so she this is a document that's been in place for years and years and years, so she updates this, but collectively, we go through here and Linda will take a first look at it, I'll take a look at it, we'll go back and forth, and then we will set up time to meet with police, fire, and DPW together, and then I meet with all the other departments and go over the budget. So that is really, I would say it's a team process, and it couldn't be done without those entities. It just couldn't. And this year's the first year I actually asked all of the departments that somehow collected revenue, whether it was the building, Board of Health, licensing, or building inspections, to give us a good estimate of what they thought they were going to be getting. Because we were really kind of not really focusing on that. We were getting an estimate from the assessor and the collectors, but not all those other entities. And we were surprised. We had underestimated some of that revenue. So that was really, really helpful. This is after a year, it was a year ago we did a rate increase for, I had all of those departments look at what they were charging for licenses and permits and things like that. And did they need to be updated? They needed to provide a market analysis of towns to say what were they charging for rates. And then the select board looked at it and took the recommendations. It did help. It definitely helped. So this way, doing it every year, there's an expectation that department heads will look at their estimates, just like our expectations when I meet with them on their budgets, to make sure they understand where they are year to date. And it's usually December, and what they're asking for. It's got to jive. I've got to see what those extra requests are for.
How often do you think revenues should be looked at and fees being charged should be looked at?
So Hadley hadn't done it for a long time in a couple of the departments, so we were in desperate need. Water and sewer, we're still not where we need to be, but we also understand that we can't just put that burden on to the residents. I would say at least every 3 years, take a look.
So
I really would like to see, though, we have 2 projects in place doing asset management for our water and sewer, which will include a rate analysis to tell us what our rates should be to help pay for some of the infrastructure that's coming up. That's going to be critical because that's never been done. And I don't think that's unique to a lot of communities. There hasn't been that, looking back, and it's very clear that you don't, just like our compensation, you've got to have that, you have to stay on a plan for rate increases and increases with salaries.
So is your general fund supplementing your water sewer?
General fund,
Yeah.
we do chargeback, so it's an enterprise fund.
So how?
Is that what you mean?
No, but so how are your you said your rates aren't where they should be, so.
You didn't want to put it back on the residents.
So how are you
It's
collecting?
It's better, but it's not.
But how are you collecting enough money to cover
We're
the
collecting
expenses?
enough to cover the expenses, but not for capital. We're not taking
Oh, okay.
enough for future capital.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes,
So
I'm
it's future
sorry.
capital. It's not
Future
current.
capital.
It's not
Not
current
current
debt
capital.
service.
Yeah, thank you.
I was going exactly where she was because
was
I'm like,
making so much
isn't your
sense to
water
me.
and sewer and enterprise fund? Like, I'm just like,
Yes, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So one of the benefits here in Palmer is that water is districts.
I know, I learned all about that.
What's a benefit?
Well, it's a benefit and a curse.
Well, and I learned the challenges that come with that, with having different water districts, yes. Yeah, but it was interesting.
So do you do revenue and expenditure forecasting as part of your budget process?
So, not as, I've brought it up a lot. We're not there yet,
Okay.
and a lot of it is because we don't have an in-house accountant. That's a critical thing that I probably should share with you. So some of the things that happen by outsourcing with accounting, you don't have that daily connection with an accountant. So the accountant, a lot of this, the accountant should be helping with this data entry and helping us with that forecasting. It is a difficult thing to hire right now. We've advertised once, couldn't get anybody, and now we outsource. But they don't provide that support to help putting that document together.
Right.
And my job is like a fire hose. So there's wish lists that I would like to do, but the importance of forecasting. I know I'm going to get into an area that I've been watching, but I think having policies and procedures, what you're going to do, do I say it, free cash, and all of that, I think that is really important. We have some old policies that we aren't following. They're not binding, but it helps give us some guardrails on how to move forward, and absolutely helps with our bond rating. And
Do you have a capital plan?
we have a capital working group that I put together last year. We have a capital planning committee, but they just we tend to do most of our capital in the fall, and they tend to just want to deal with year to year. Okay. So I have a working group that is working on it. We had been more, I think that was 21. We actually met a couple of times to get that in place, and it is time to bring that back together. It's there. I don't think it's totally accurate. I'm going to be honest with you. It needs more work, but I think that's huge. It's almost like the asset management plan we're doing for water and sewer. We need to do it for all of the other capital requests. We have some big stuff coming up.
So do you fund capital with your free cash when you get your free cash certified, or how are you funding capital?
All different ways: free cash, borrowing, and we're building up a stabilization. We have two. We have regular stabilization, and then we have a capital, and that's very low right now. Everything kind of got nailed during COVID, but we have brought up our regular stabilization to $2 million, which is really good for Hadley. And yeah, so it's borrowing.
Okay. Do you have a balanced budget or a balanced budget with free cash?
Always use free cash in Hadley to balance,
The budget. How much money do you
It's
use?
getting better. It is getting better from a few years ago. ARPA helped a little bit with that, honestly. It helped with that, not us depending on it. We're not there yet. I think, what is the percentage? I'm trying to think. I know we're using about $350,000 for FY25. It had been much higher in the past, so it's getting better.
And can you tell us specifically about the steps that you took to wean the community off of using free cash for the budget?
ARPA helped a little bit because we're still catching up now that we don't have ARPA. I think it's been a combination of when I first got there, when I met with departments, and I worked in towns that this is how it was. Everyone just kind of added a certain percent every year. What I asked for, and the select board were really supportive of it, is tell me what you need and submit that and let's talk. And so we were able to do that. But what I did when we sat down to go over the budgets, there was the former administration was, or just the way things were done before, was it didn't matter the line items. What mattered was what was the bottom line. If the bottom line in your budget was okay, then that was okay. But I wanted them tell me what each line item covers. I wanted to know what it took to run the department, and to teach them. At the end of December, if you asked for $8,000 and you still have $6,000 left, that you're not truly understanding what is getting paid for out of that line item. And they'd say, well, we'll just move it to a line item that we haven't budgeted high enough for. And I can't fault them for that in a sense that that's kind of how it had always been. But we have changed from that to saying, okay, if you've got this much money left over, let me put it where it needs to be instead of just inflating those budgets all the time. So that has helped us wean off some of our free cash because the budgets are much more accurate. The danger there is when we're in a situation where we still rely so heavily on free cash, if I tighten up those budgets so much, then we don't have free cash. So it's like a catch-22. So the departments have been very good, and only this year was the first year I hadn't been able to honor their request because we are really still trying to. This is, in the past 3 years, is the first time they're using free cash that's actually certified when they balance the budget. In the past, they were relying on future certification. And so this is a really good place for Hadley to be.
Okay.
So you used ARPA funds to supplement your operating expenses?
Yes. Now, we rely heavily on Route 9. So although we didn't see a huge decrease, but some of that decrease was helped by ARPA because mostly our hotels, because we have several hotels. So. Mm-hmm.
Okay, as far as project management, so you had discussed several different projects in the beginning, but more specifically, 4 projects that you have been part of. Have you been successful in getting grants
Yes.
for those projects? Can you talk about that a little bit?
So in Hamden, when that was new, which was quite a few years ago, I worked with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and we were able to get community development block grant funding. And I learned a ton working with Jim Masick. I don't know if anybody worked with Jim over at Pioneer Valley, but he was fantastic and taught all about procurement. But he really let me help with that by getting all the data and the research to provide for him. And so that was successful. We also did a great job. The Friends group did a great job of raising funds. The senior center world is a lot of grant writing. Now, it's not the massive grants that come from MassWorks, but you do a lot of grant writing. So there's many projects that rely on grants. The senior centers, I have a very good relationship with our legislators, so I'm very comfortable calling them, developing friendships with them. So calling up and asking for an earmark, I have no problem with that. So East Long Meadow had an earmark, Hamden had an earmark, Wilbraham had an earmark, and I have gotten earmarks in Hadley. So it's a lot easier than I think people realize it.
What type of projects did you get earmarks for?
So all three of the senior centers have had an earmark, and the trailers that we renovated just to get through until we can build a senior center. We actually renovated the trailers at the DPW because they weren't livable. They weren't livable. That was a critical thing to do.
So besides CDBG money and earmarks, any other specific grant opportunities that you took advantage of and were successful with?
So let me think. I work a lot with DPW right now and working with engineers. Now, the engineers write the grant, but we work together to kind of prioritize the grants and be able to get all of the information and help to do a lot of the paperwork that goes with it. But I'm not saying that I submit those grants, but I participate in a lot of that grant funding. And there's a lot out there right now for engineers and infrastructure for DPW. There's a lot of grants that aren't relative to the whole picture of town government, except through the senior centers. That's where I did most of my grant writing. Right now, a lot of it is the time we don't have a planner, we don't have a planning department. We do have a planning board. So most of the grants that I collaborate with are with DPW right now.
Okay.
Could I?
Yeah.
You had talked about in the financial area there, getting rates back up to, what rates should be. How do we? I know they have to go up, whatever, from time to time. But how do you combat rate increases in dealing with, residents saying we already pay too much, or, how do we balance that, I guess, is that scenario of, okay, we need to get this done and it's got to go up, and try to make it as painless,
I think you have to be really clear in how you communicate what the rates pay for. And I think when you have visuals, I'll give an example. We have to replace some water tanks that are millions of dollars, And so to be able to show this is what our future expense is going to be, and how it benefits the whole community. Yeah, you're always gonna have a resident who is just gonna be frustrated by increases in taxes, increase in rates. We do our best. I do my best. The departments do their best to explain why. But I think it's really important that you have visuals. I'm a visual person. I brought PowerPoint to town meeting because they want to see what the truck looks like. They want to see what the tanks look like. And I think it makes a huge difference when they can see that and realize what it does for their community, even to do a video to go through the water treatment plant on what it takes to have that water come out clear through your sink. Takes all of this massive, and to do those visuals and to be able to show that and work with your cable access is huge. And they're eager. And I think that's been really, really helpful to have that energy to be able to do when we did the DPW feasibility study to get funding for that, I couldn't believe the quality of work that came out of our cable access station. It was unbelievable. It was great. Yeah.
Anything else? Are you MCPPO certified? Yeah. Okay.
Just a time check.
I know.
Sorry.
No, you're
I
fine.
was succinct though, right, Brian?
You're doing very
We're
well.
fine. No, we're fine.
These people are not.
Yeah.
We're always the
It's
problem.
us. And I'm that one resident.
All right, so let's switch to economic development for a couple minutes. Any specific projects, or, I'm sorry, not projects, businesses that you've brought into Hadley or been a part of different things to spur economic development?
So, Route 9 is Hadley, so economic development is always an issue. They're wanting to pursue it. But we probably have as much businesses coming in asking to open. And so our challenges honestly is, and I think it's similar, is when a restaurant wants to come into to the mall or something, and there's challenges like in every community with economic development, and trying to identify what they would be in Palmer would be, that would be really important. In every community, it's infrastructure, water. How much is it going to cost for a restaurant? Sometimes it's you can't do it. So I've been a part of a lot of the discussions. I meet with our local, the hotel owners in our community on a regular basis. I meet with our chamber president on a regular basis to hear more about what's going on. And what the concerns are, and that's another open door. They call me and say, "Look, this fee that we're getting, can you just explain it?" So I would say that has been my involvement, and I know that economic development from all your documents is really, really important. And again, I think I need to know more about what some of the challenges are. I think it's a little presumptuous for me to offer what I think Palmer needs to do until I really understand it. But I know you have so many opportunities, but again, back to the villages, how do you balance that?
So,
Oh, go ahead. Yep.
As a frequent shopper in Hadley, I know that Bed Bath & Beyond is gone, and now there's that vacant, very large vacant space in the strip mall there. And similar in Palmer, we do have, large buildings that are vacant that could be used for commercial development on Route 20. So what is your role in either helping fill that vacancy or your relationship with the strip mall owners and their interest in filling that vacancy? What is your role in all of that?
So honestly, I don't take a role in identifying that empty space. I haven't been invited to that table to do that. There's a relationship with the owners of the malls because we have to deal with things if there's a problem or, and again, the really neat thing that Hadley has done is created a business council so that the business council meets with a member of our select board on a regular basis and brings in our department heads to talk about that. It brings up great information, but most of it's challenges, and that has to come back to whatever relevant department it is to say this is a challenge that we're facing. What can we do? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes a license is a license, or the appraisal is the appraisal, and we can't change that. But it's just trying to have that open communication. Like the Mass DOT I talked about with the widening, I talked with a lot of the businesses because they got significantly impacted by that.
Anything else? So does Hadley have a master plan?
Yes, they do.
So what steps do you take in Hadley to ensure that the recommendations of the master plan are carried out?
I think it's the hardest part of every community. It's it's a little challenging because I think we still piecemeal things. There's no one to oversee the master plan, and to make sure. And I think a lot of communities have that problem is how do you implement the master plan? We don't have a planner. We have all volunteers on our planning board. So we don't have that one individual to help oversee that master plan. There's bits and pieces of it that we can help with, but just to be honest with you, I think a lot of it is time, staff time, to be able to keep everybody accountable to it. You know, we can have the residents say no more signs, but we keep approving more signs. So it's, you know,
So-
how do you?
Palmer does have a planning department and everything, so how do you utilize that now, I guess?
Oh,
to-
that would be amazing.
you know,
That's what,
to-
that's the top, that and IT position are the two
How are you
top
gonna
positions.
use
I
that
would
to
work
your benefit?
closely with that. That's another town administrator's dream, is to have a planner and a council and a select board, because that is where a lot of your grants get utilized, and that administration comes through that department. So I would work closely in that department for sure.
So our planner of a very long time, she just got a position in another community, so we kind of lost a lot of that institutional knowledge, and her assistant also left around the same time. So in that department, we do have new staff. And I think this kind of goes into a little bit of personnel management, of that in Palmer, we're very lucky that we have very talented staff, but we also have staff that are very new at their jobs. So as the town manager, how would you help support somebody like our planner, who, you know, is new to this position and, you know, there's a lot going on in Palmer.
Grow wings, per se, right?
So how would you help support that person if if being a planner isn't necessarily your background, like how would you help a person grow in their position, where that might not be your specialty either?
I think one of the benefits of working in a couple different communities and just being a relationship person, I know a lot of planners, and I know the importance of associations with each department. So I would really encourage to help to ensure that they're participating and connecting with their neighbors. That's how I learned in every position I've ever been in. I relied on my position, whether it was a COA director or anything. I reach out to other communities and build up those relationships. But I think that's what I have to. How can I help them? I need them to, and even if they can't identify it, if the more I get to know them, I know how to help them. And I just have a lot of relationships out there that I call on all the time. Old IT directors, former, like I call and say, I need help with this. Where should I go? I think the most important thing I can do is reach out and not live in a silo and not think that I can do it without help.
Anything else from anybody? So, as far as personnel management, I think that there's a bit of potential morale issues in some departments. Have you had situations where you've had to deal with morale of an entire department? And what steps did you put in place to solve the issues?
I think sometimes, honestly, Barbara, it's hard to fix some of the morale, and especially in town government when it's a little bit different in the private sector. I can't do a performance evaluation. If you do this really well, you're going to get a raise. Can't do that. So our hands are tied a little bit. Low morale can come in a lot of different ways. It can be, and I would say, and I know some of my staff are watching right now, I think we have an issue with low morale. Part of it is we haven't filed a compensation study. So the steps I'm taking is making sure that compensation study gets in place. The rollout of compensation study is very painful because it's difficult to understand that your position is your job description is it's the position, not how many years you've been there or all of that, because that comes later when we add the steps. But that is the most critical thing. In Hadley, it has been neglected for many, many years, just like infrastructure, just like everything else. So this compensation for me is that step I needed to take to get everybody on a fair bottom line, and then put the steps together, and then to be able to fund it. And that's going to be our next challenge. So, but the important thing is that you maintain that compensation study, that the wage scales, and every year or every 2 years, however those steps are, that those are implemented and funded.
Looking at you guys, if you. was going to keep going.
We
Okay.
can talk all night, so
Yeah,
that's why I'm waiting. We're just
well,
pushing things along. That's
Yeah,
all.
okay. As far as like external relationships, so you touched upon the fact that you have a great relationship with your, the state rep or state senator. You talked about the uniqueness of Palmer with the villages. So, we have multiple fire departments, we have multiple water departments. What do you see your role in specifically the things that are unique to Palmer? So how will you keep communications going with these people? What steps would you take to have that happen?
So I love meeting new people. So I am not shy about just calling up an employee or a fire chief, police chief, anybody to call up and just say, I want to come and let's get together, and to keep maintaining that, to always have that ongoing relationship. There's no way I'm going to find out what the unique challenges are unless I meet with people in those different villages. There's no way, and that to me is interesting. It's interesting to be able to see the differences in the villages and there's different demographics in all of those villages, so they all are unique. So I guess the best way to answer that is I'm friendly. I like to meet people, and I like getting to know people and hearing about what their department is and what the challenges are.
So just to go back to economic development for a minute, it seems that there's been too many times where I want to say this politically correctly. So there's been a lot of circumstances where potential businesses were going to come into the community, and then through no fault of the town, COVID, different situations change where it's not economically feasible for a business to now come, and but the perception of residents potentially is that the town is not business friendly. So we have a Mass Pike interchange that has no development at the end of it. We have one grocery store in town. We have, as Jessica said, a lot of vacant buildings. So we have heading to Wilbraham, as you know, where the Kmart Plaza was, okay? Yeah. So we have a lot of these situations. We've had a lot of situations where a business is going to come and everyone gets excited about a business, and then they find out the land they were looking at is wet, and so they can't build the business there. So a lot of times it seems like the cart comes before the horse, and then they find out, oops. But again, the perception is that it's the town council or the town did something to have that business not come in. So I guess I would like your how you deal, if you can be very specific. So we're kind of talking like on a high level, but we have these are like the real issues of the town of, Bank of America closes their branches. That building's been sitting vacant for a very long time. Friendly's now closed that building. It's been vacant for a while. There's what was a convenience store gas station near CVS on the corner, again, prime location, not being developed. The interstate, as I talked about, the projects on the hill that, we've taught, it's, a water park, there's been other things over the years. There's always something that makes something not happen. So that's important. That's things that are important to the residents of the community. So what can you bring to us for those type of situations?
I think what I can bring to it is bringing together the right players. Not saying it's going to be immediately successful, but to bring up the right players, whether it's the planning board, whether it's a member of the council, to be at the same table, because I can't do it without the history of Palmer and what the challenges are. And to be able to find out, again, to learn what are the like you just mentioned, too wet of a location. In that case, it's almost prioritizing the projects, prioritizing funding sources to help mitigate some of that. They can't make it a lot drier. They can't do that, but because I don't know what some of the situations are, I mean, some of the, even Mass Works, when you apply to it, they have funding for some of these issues, for some things, because you're trying to build up economic development. And so for me, it's going to be working with the planning to find out what they're prioritizing, what do they see as economic development, and then any land use issues. I mean, it's bringing so many entities into it to be able to find out what the issues are. But again, definitely prioritizing, because I think sometimes it gets so overwhelming, it's easy to get stuck. And but then to understand that it does really take time. But I know the frustration of people think Hadley's not business friendly, and we are very business friendly. We know it in the town hall, but how do we get that out there? Right. And so that's part of what the Business Council is trying to get that message across, is that we're helpful. We're here. We want to help. I think it's just looking at that initially. It's just prioritizing. Maybe there's a priority list of all of those, but is there, has there been a total audit of all of those empty buildings? Does that document sit somewhere? Could someone come in, whether it's an engineer or a consultant, to look at all of those vacant buildings and find out what the issues are? I mean, some of them may not be fixable. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I know it's overwhelming, and I know it's hard when you get some residents who just don't understand what the challenges are.
And so there are a lot of outstanding issues in town. Mm-hmm. As Jess said, we have a lot of new staff. We can pretty much go to every department and, we have new staff. So obviously whoever the next town manager is, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be, it's probably not going to necessarily be the things that the town manager planned to do as they walked in the door, but more of the fires that need to be put out, and a lot of time and effort to get things that, have been lagging behind, getting those things kind of closed out. So, of course, you're going to say you're up for that challenge. But when you went to Hadley, I mean, did you have those kind of situations?
It still is like that.
Okay.
It still is like that. And I always use the example when someone says, explain your day, I said, it's a fire hose. And I'm not kidding. Every day is like a fire hose. But I still have to work in those times where I have to work on priority projects. And again, I think it is overwhelming. I don't know that it's unique, except Palmer is unique. There is a uniqueness to many of the surroundings. It's not Wilbraham. It's not Hamden. So I think you have more of those challenges than other communities, for sure. But I have to know what's the talent in the town, and is there outside talent that you need to bring in, and to be that support person to say I am a very good delegator too, an appropriate delegator. I'm not going to, when I know I'm taking on too much, like this is when the treasurer stepped in and said, can I help? And I said, yes, I need help, because my quality of work elsewhere where I'm needed to problem solve is hurting, and that is my priority right now. So I do think there's talent out there that's just sometimes not tapped internally and externally. So it sounds weird. Part of that is what's appealing to this job. I like challenges. Am I going to be able to accomplish that, to address them all at once? Absolutely not. I would never come in here and say that I could. Maybe to get one of those done this year would be great. But that it is what keeps me energized. When I get to it hasn't happened yet in Hadley, but when I get to the day-to-day stuff, it is just the same thing every day. That's where I lose my enthusiasm. So I do like a challenge.
So, not to leave it just as challenges, but Palmer has we're set right now with a bunch of opportunities. Yep. So yes, Palmer comes with challenges, but on the flip side, Palmer has a lot of opportunity. So I just didn't want to leave it at that we're full of problems.
That's good.
That there is a lot of opportunity here to grow and to be a better town altogether, and to give back more to the residents. So.
Yeah, and I mean, Jessica did talk about, I mean, we do have a good team here. I think it's just more about utilizing them.
Yeah, I've
a
heard
little
that
bit
there's a
more.
very good team here
Yeah.
from people who have either worked here before or, I think I mentioned to you, I stole Troy Bryn from Munson and brought him on board, and that's been a great, he's our HR director and has helped immensely, but he adores this town. And when he talks about it, that was part of the draw, because I can trust him. And that was part of the draw as well.
So, really quick, while we're talking about personnel, I'm not sure how big your staff was in Hadley, and it sounds almost similar to what
It
you
sounds
have
like it.
in Palmer here. But there may be times I don't, like I said, like you have resources maybe in Hadley that you're not going to have here in Palmer, and you're going to have Palmer resources that you're not going to have in Hadley.
It's usually what happens, yeah.
Right, exactly. So, how do you balance that something that you had relied on somebody else in your other community to do for you that you don't have anymore?
So I see if it could work. So I'll give an example. It was a Board of Health, elected Board of Health, volunteers, the Board of Health members did all the inspections. Didn't do the inspections because they couldn't. They were all volunteers. We outsourced for about 100 inspections a year, nowhere near enough. And I was able to convince the select board, the finance committee, that the money that you put into hiring an inspector, you're going to bring back double. And pretty much that's what happens. With all of the, now he's doing inspections. We have a full-time inspector. It took about 2 or 3 years. Huge, huge difference. Same with adding a part-time building inspector. Yes, there's an initial, you got to squeeze the funds to make it work, but that position will also bring in additional inspections. So it's, I think that's, you also, there's, we've been able to, since I've been there, I've been able to increase staff. We didn't have a planner, but now we have a land use coordinator that I took pieces out of everybody's budget for admin, and they weren't really spending it, all of the volunteer boards. And now I have a land use coordinator who's a conservation agent, but she's helping planning board with their minutes, she's helping CPA, and she's helping ZBA. So that's critical, and it was not a hit on the budget. Because I took money out of other people's budgets to say, I got someone to help you with minutes. I've got someone to help you with agendas, and put it onto one person. So it was just creative to look at what's out there. And trust me, that wasn't just my decision alone. It was input from other people. Look, you've got this conservation agent. She wants to work more hours. And land use is, all of those departments use land use, including CPA, because we have so much agricultural APRs. So that really helped as well.
Nice.
So we have about 5 minutes to, I just want to, is there anything that we didn't ask that you guys want to?
Are we going to give her an opportunity to ask us?
Yeah, but I want to make sure, yeah.
I know you're
Yeah.
What's that?
All set, Phil?
Yeah.
Okay, did you have any questions for us?
No, the only question, it's not even a question. It's if I were in your shoes, I would be wondering, because I'm older, and I know that you can't ask that question, but I want to be able to assure you that I want to answer that. I am not ready to retire, and I would like to be working at least another 6 years, because I'm not sure I'm ready to, I need this type of level of activity in my life, and I don't think I'm never going to leave municipal government, so I just want to assure you that I'm not going to be starting and retiring in 3 years and having you own that. So you can't ask that, but I can tell you.
You don't look that old. Come on.
Do you have, what is your, do you have a contract that has a termination or
Yeah,
out clause?
it is 60 days. So I'm sure there's some work of, I guess my only question back to you, how long will Robert stay?
His car is running out.
I know, that's what I'm.
think you
I'm-
wanted
First
to
rumor
weekend, he
has
was
it-
like, I'm going to help Bernie.
I mean, I think we haven't really talked about this. I envision though, like maybe a day or two of transition between the two, and that's it. And then he'll be gone because golfing season is coming up and he needs to hit the road.
Okay.
So I don't think it'll be much more than that. I mean, we can discuss that obviously, but
Even if there was some halftime days.
well, yes, we'll have to see what Bob wants to do. We'll have
You
to
may
see.
have to chase him out of the parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I don't have any questions.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
I want to take like a 5-minute recess,
please.
and then we will be right back.
Thank you very much. It was great
Thank
to
you.
see all of you guys being
Yeah,
in here.
thank
It's
you.
much smaller than I thought. It looks ginormous.
Oh, from home? Yeah.
It's great. Thank you.
said you could pay that too, right?
They do. They do. And it's funny that you mentioned the. What did you bring up? Oh, the Chamber of Commerce. I'm the president of the Chamber of Commerce.
I know that.
So it was just like,
Like he didn't.
So I was like, come on now. You did your homework, so I'm
Sue.
sure that.
Right, is Sue your collector?
Yes.
Yes, so Sue actually teaches a course with me for MCTA. Yeah, but she's retiring in 2 years?
It's 2 to 3 years. It's
Okay.
her, my assessor's.
That'll probably be me too, but yeah, okay. Okay, we are back. Okay, so our next candidate is Brad Brothers. So Brad, the format's going to be, I'm going to start the questions, council will interject, okay, if they have any follow-ups, and we'll go from there. And we have about an hour, 15 to 20 minutes, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, so you could just take a couple of minutes to tell us why you're interested in the position and why you feel that you would be successful here.
Sure. So some of you may know I grew up in the town of Palmer, graduated high school here back in 2008, went on to stay local went to American International College for my undergrad, kind of got into the field of the school business manager role, and actually lucked out where Palmer opened up right when I was graduating college and started the position right in Palmer. So I was able to continue on and kind of start my professional career here in Palmer. I had hopes of one day coming back, and sure enough, that opportunity presented itself. I built a lot of good relationships here in Palmer that with folks that are still employed here today. I've had good conversations with a couple of department heads who are now employed in Palmer that were not department heads before, and their vision kind of aligned with what I envisioned for Palmer. Growing up here, playing kids sports at Burley Park, playing at Converse Middle School, going to events at the high school, really a full scope of from my childhood to professional career really started and is in Palmer, and I'm excited to come back. So that vision that I have and what I was able to go through as a kid into my adulthood is really what I want to see for everyone that goes through Palmer.
I'm continuing. Nothing from anyone?
And do you want me to go on a little bit more about my professional career and where I'm at now?
I would say, just give
sure,
us
to give you full scope.
background. Yeah.
So I was 26 years old, so I had worked for the town of Palmer in the school business manager role for about 4.5 years. An opportunity came up to move to the South Shore. I was ready to try something a little bit different than Palmer at the time, but given the role of the school business manager field, it was a little tough transition for me to make, only having 4 years of experience. So Carver opened up. Carver was very similar to Palmer, about the same total a population, same total students roughly, 3 schools at the time, very similar to Palmer again. So that was an easy transition for me. They looked at my experience here as saying, kind of, you guys know how it is when you work in a small town or small school system, you kind of wear every hat. So they liked that experience of having someone who kind of not only was the school business manager, but worked in HR, handled day-to-day operations, worked with parents across the board. So that was a good fit for me to make the move at the time. Then I did 4.5 years for the Carver schools. Plymouth opened up right next door. Much different system. It was my first jump, and it was a good opportunity for me to take the next step in my career. They have 13 different school buildings. The operating budget when I moved over just for the school department was $109 million. And again, just a good next step for my professional career. About a year and a half in there, I was going through contract negotiations. One of the it was the Board of Selectmen in Plymouth. One of the Board of Selectmen sits on the committee for negotiations with the School Teachers Association. I got to work very closely with them. Saw myself kind of aligning a lot with what the long-term vision was for the town. So along the course of my career, whether it was in Palmer, actually in Carver as well, and in Plymouth, my close work with the town in the school business manager role, they kind of always wanted me to actually go on to what they call, the school would call it the dark side, which is the municipal side. But reality is, it's a team effort, it's a global approach, and that's really what kind of was able to, they recruited me from the school side to go to the town because, again, no matter where I was, I always carried that vision for the larger picture rather than just the individual school department. And that's where I am now. So Plymouth has a population of 65,000. It jumps up to roughly 90,000 in the summer, and our budget's just under $3 million.
Wow.
So yeah, you
300
mentioned
million.
Yeah,
280
$3 million would be really impressive.
Taxpayers are very.
yeah.
You just saved him a lot of money.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Move the decimal point
Exactly.
a little bit. So you talked about how transitioning from Palmer to Carver was relatively easy because similar school district or similar metrics for the districts. I imagine that making a transition from Plymouth to Palmer I would not categorize it as being as easy just because of the sheer size of the community, the budget, the resources that you have, as well as the fact that it is a Cape town. Like there's just a lot of different issues that the town would deal with. So how would you approach a transition into Palmer on the municipal side?
Yeah, no, I think it's the same fundamentals. I think no matter whether it was the school side or the town side, working in a small municipal government, whether it's town or school, you have to wear every hat. And you have to have input on everything, and you have a lot more eyesight on everything that goes on day to day. So I don't think that would be really an issue at all. One thing I've done in Plymouth is budget and finance has always been my strong suit. So when I went to Plymouth, I made it a point to get involved in things that were kind of my weaknesses. And that really was economic development, planning. So I've been able to sit in a lot of meetings on that to try to learn that. So I knew one day when this transition comes, it'll most likely be in a smaller community like Palmer or wherever it opened up to better suit myself to make that transition seamless.
So, most, we're going to do the reverse interview question, right? So most it would be, so why Palmer and, what things interest you about Palmer, but obviously you're from Palmer, so you kind of know all of that stuff. But my question for you would be this. So have you thought about and how do you perceive this happening of you do know a lot of people here, and so now you're coming in as, the town manager, and you're going to have to be in a position of people that you grew up with or parents of, there's just, make the list as long as you want, that you now have to not, you have to be the bearer of bad news, right? The answer isn't always yes, sure. So how have you thought about that, and what are your thoughts about that?
No, I absolutely have, and I think that's part of the reason why I think I transitioned really in any role so well is that I'm very consistent, and I think that's a very good quality to have because no matter who's coming and going from my office, they're getting the same answer. And that's the key, because that's how you build credibility, whether it's through the residents or it's through your division heads, your department heads, all staff levels. Again, I just go back to, if you're not consistent, you don't build credibility. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's going to be hard conversations. Sometimes I think I'm brought into the conversations from department heads because I can say no. So I think they've brought me into a lot of conversations to actually be the one sometimes that can say, no, that's not the direction we're going to go in, and we have to go a different way.
I think the role here is more you're now driving the department heads, and that's based off of the goals that we all put together collectively, right? So it's a little different as to you're taking input, right, and around goals and meeting, the needs of the town versus as one of your opening comments, I think you said this the last time too, is you were in line with what their thought process or their goals were, right? So I was just kind of leaning off of what you're saying there, Barbara, is there's that line now, right?
So, Jessica kind of touched on the fact that obviously Plymouth has a lot more resources, and I'm assuming a lot more staff in all the different
500 full-time
areas.
staff, yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, and so, coming here, and, of course, you're aware of the structure, but, you have to wear a lot of hats because there's nobody else to wear them.
Yep.
Do you think that will be a tough transition? So I know we'll get into some of the other stuff. I down the road there'll be more questions about this stuff, but I want to specifically like HR, for instance, right? So you're HR because there's no HR department, and there's no assistant town manager, and and we can keep building that kind of. And we have a lot of new department heads. And so some of the long-term employees have either retired or moved on to different positions. Again, all things that I'm sure you're very well aware of. But, that usually when a lot of times it's the opposite way, right? You're going from the smaller community to the bigger community. Now you're coming back this way. Not saying that's a bad thing, but what are your thoughts on that?
I get it. I still go back to fundamentally the core competencies that I had in the school world still translate very well to the town side of having to wear every hat and acknowledging that in Plymouth. Like I mentioned before, I worked in my areas that I wouldn't feel comfortable with meeting with people one-on-one. I knew that was my weakness. So I've taken time to actually spend time and understand more of really their day-to-day operations so I can kind of speak their language.
Okay.
I mean, I still can't speak engineering. I'll be honest. Like, I'm never going to be an engineer. But again, having the ability to communicate effectively, so you both have an understanding with the department head, is half the battle.
Maybe if I could ask a question along these same lines. Assistant managers are different everywhere. Obviously I have a background working with numerous municipalities across the Commonwealth, and I see assistant managers, and it really depends on how the manager utilizes it. Just even in Plymouth, the current manager who you work with, the prior manager had an assistant manager that was used differently than
that's a good point.
Than
Yeah.
than it was done before. So, what is your role as the assistant manager? What's your portfolio of
So
responsibilities?
prior to me going over to the town side in Plymouth, the town manager had about, I think, 3 or 4 direct reports. It was the town clerk, the airport, procurement, and I think there was maybe one other division. Going over, knowing my skill set, what the town manager did was they did a reorg essentially, that there's no single department that reports directly to the assistant town manager now. Now it's both the town manager and the assistant town manager all filter through. So all the departments now, if there's their day-to-day operations, they start with me and then they'll go to the town manager if there's a further question or something that I can't address at my level. So that was a change. It was originally, there was about 3 or 4, like I said, key divisions that reported to the assistant, and that's all they did on the day-to-day. They got assigned work from the town manager separate to that for special projects, but now all operations, whether it's police, fire, the HR, town clerk, that all now goes through the assistant town manager.
Can you give us an example of a time when, as all of the department heads are reporting directly to you, but you said there are instances where you may not be able to solve whatever they're coming to you with. Can you give us an example of where a department head may have had to go to the town manager for something that you, I'm not trying to like belittle your qualifications or your skills, but I'm just trying to say, like, tell us about maybe a weakness, like where you couldn't solve a problem, but the town manager needed to take over.
I wouldn't say it was more problems. It was more philosophy on things. So for planning, for example, if I met with if we had a third party come in who was trying to build a business in town and I wasn't able to answer specific questions on how I saw it rolling out, we needed to bring in the town manager's vision, because ultimately he's the one at the end of the day that kind of directs the vision we're going with and moving forward on in the direction. So it would be things like that I hit a roadblock that I really needed him to weigh in on.
Okay.
That would where we would bring him in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about, oh, go ahead. Okay.
So being a resident from town, right, and growing up in town, you obviously understand the unique challenges that we have here in town. What would you like to accomplish, though, if you became Palmer's next town manager?
So I think there's a lot of things internally that need to be addressed in about a probably less than a year window. Again, going back to my strong suit is finance. I look at our budget here and I think of sustainability and are things that we're operating sustainable. Key one, school department. School department, we're operating with a graduating class of about 50 kids. That's not sustainable. Their budget to request every year is going to be far outpace what the revenues that are going to be available to provide to the school department. So it's having honest conversations. And that's just one piece. There's other things that you can talk about that help relax that a little bit. In Carver, I was able to work with the town on kind of sharing some services through IT facilities. We did that with the town. Both worked out well because they were well thought out. And we actually got grants to bring a consultant in to kind of work through some of the boards don't always work together sometimes. Not saying that's here in Palmer, but in Carver, there was a little bit difficulty with that. So bringing in a third-party consultant kind of lead the direction on that was very a positive approach in how to handle that. So going back, I guess, all the opportunities here excite me because I think I can address a lot of things in my first year here that put us on the right trajectory. But there's also a lot of things that are going to have to take time to build. I know we'll probably talk about economic development at some point, but kind of have an untapped market here that I feel like once we get a clear direction on the East-West Rail, that's the time to ramp up and really talk about fixing our downtown area. I mean, I drove by the other day and there's all sorts of properties that I feel like are like blight properties that we really should be addressing because we want to attract people to our town. And if that's what they're driving by, if East-West Rail comes, right, we want to clean that up. We don't want them to leave here with the thought of Palmer's downtown is really not up to par. And again, building that community.
Since you mentioned East-West Rail, what do you see as the town manager's role in the railroad project or the town as a whole? I think there's some differing opinions on how much of a role the town is supposed to take. So what is your position on that?
I think they should definitely be at the table for that. I'm not saying town manager has to be a leader on that, but at the same time, we should be in the know and have some input and say on the direction of it. Because again, I want to be able to report to you guys, hey, things have shifted now. It's really looking at 7 years out instead of 3 years because that'll change our organizational philosophy. So the position definitely has to be in the know on that. But I think there's a lot of external factors that go on and relationships that need to be built to have that conversation to really what is realistic. And again, I haven't researched it fully. Right now it's the busiest time in Plymouth. So even like the master plan, I dive through half of. I haven't gone through that entirely yet. But getting a feel for where the project stands right now, I think would be big for me to figure out. Yes, do I need to spend a lot of my time into this, or is it still in the infancy stage where I don't need to invest that much time in it?
Mm-hmm.
So can you, oh, go ahead.
Being that you are from town and stuff, how do you feel marketing Palmer? You know every place that could be developed in this town. What do you feel is an acceptable marketing perception of, some places market their towns as a recreational place, marketing and drawing businesses into these places?
That's a good question. Palmer, I feel like we have a lot of, my number one would be to address a lot of the vacant buildings we have in town. I think that's, to me, like number one. I'd rather than build new, I'd prefer that we revamp and redevelop our existing infrastructure if it's possible. But what I see is I want Palmer to be more than just the exit to get to UMass. And honestly, that's what a lot of people talk about. Now, to say that we're a great fit for every business, I'll be honest, in one of the towns I've worked in the past, you don't always fit. We had a goal of getting a med science type program into our town. Reality was, when we looked into it, is the job market that's needed for those positions really didn't exist. So it was a dream that we had, But reality is, if the market's not there, the business can't come. So same thing with Palmer. We really need to dive into what's the job market. If that's our goal, is to get something in town that offers a lot of jobs. What's the job market, and is that a fit for us?
And how would you go about doing that?
It's really talking with the chamber, seeing what Palmer demographics are, which you're going to have a good idea for, but really, what's their draw to? Are you drawing from, people from Belchertown drive the 15-minute drive to work in Palmer? And again, it's so dependent on the field that you're looking for, but it's getting a better feel on that. And again, I go back to, I really want to see the vacant buildings we have here redeveloped and businesses put into them.
So on that note, you've mentioned it a couple times now. The problem per se in Palmer is that a lot of those buildings are privately owned, right? So what would be your strategy in reaching out to business owners or property owners to say, hey, let's do something with this property. I would love to see it developed.
Yeah. It goes back to really reaching out to the property owner. I don't know if you said that, but reaching specifically to the current property owner, saying, what's your long-term plan here? Is it just to sit on this building that's a depreciating asset to you, or do you want to really redevelop this and help out Palmer? I think you guys have done a good job. I don't know how much the board helped out on developing near where the plaza's going in to kind of push them along a little bit, because I know since I was a kid, we've talked about kind of moving that eyesore, for a lack of a better term, along. So it's really having honest conversations with the current owner and saying, what is your plan? And if it's not to do anything, we need to change that.
I think that plaza that you just mentioned is a great example of a private business owner that for a very long time didn't have any interest in doing anything, and then had a change of heart, and that's how that development, was spurred. So I think that's a big challenge in Palmer is the opinion, at the pleasure of the private owners of these vacant buildings.
Agree. And again, I go back to how imperative the East-West Rail is for Palmer. I think you have a lot of people. I mean, if I'm sitting on a building that is only worth $200,000 right now, and that's located within walking distance from downtown, I'm sitting on that. I mean, honestly, I'm sitting on that to figure out, because if East-West Rail does come, the value of that is gonna go up. So again, it's balancing all of that out.
West East Rail, by the way. Sorry. Just want to correct you.
Okay.
That's which way it's going.
Yeah, exactly.
So, can you just be a little bit more specific on the issues that you see? And you've kind of said the same thing. Matt's asked you, and you've said, the buildings and things like that. But in what way? What are your thoughts about the things that you would do? So just be specific, as opposed to just.
Yeah, it would be directly. It'd be reaching out to the business owners that have the vacant properties right away, and getting a feel for an inventory of really what's in town. Some of them may be in the process of leasing that the board may not know about and the town manager may not know about. So getting a good inventory of what's available, what their game plan is, and what the next 5 years look like for them. Does that answer, I guess, that?
Kinda. To follow up on that, you're talking a lot about development, right? And we have a planning department, we have a planner. The town manager's role is obviously going to be a lot more than just development, right? We have a lot of projects. Like, you live in town, you probably heard there's a lot going on. Absolutely. So the town manager's role here is going to be a pretty busy one. And I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of challenges and there's a lot of opportunities here, as you know. How would you manage, right? Because I know you're focusing right now on development. You're talking to us about development. But how would you manage your time between projects, development, HR, and all the other responsibilities that the town manager would have to do day to day?
Yeah, so it's a fine balance of knowing what the day-to-day needs are and aligning that with what the long-term strategic plan and the goals are of the board. So I think every day, even in my role now, I walk in with nothing on my schedule day-to-day, and honestly, I'm not out of there till 8 o'clock at night because a million different things got thrown at me. So it's finding that sweet balance of how it all works out. So I don't have a perfect answer for that, but it all is about finding that balance of covering your day-to-day because that's the most pressing needs, but also you can't lose sight of the long-term goals of that. And honestly, in my role, I feel like I have 20 different balls in the air at all the time. It's just because Plymouth is a very fast-moving town with a lot of things that go on and a lot of decisions that need to be made day to day. So that really doesn't scare me because, again, the volume of Plymouth, I think, is probably greater than the volume in Palmer day to day.
Gotcha. And I'm sure. I just throwing it out there that
Yeah.
your time management is probably going to be pretty taxed with a lot of stuff that's going on around.
No, and that again is helped out and relaxed a little bit by having solid department heads and division heads who can see your vision, kind of know, like I mentioned before, being consistent. One thing I've appreciated is my department heads come in and within 6 months of me being in the job, they can come in my office and ask me a question, and they actually know what my answer is going to be because I'm consistent with it, and they know what my response is going to be. So having them able to carry that conversation out without me always being in the room is key.
So that in Palmer, we have a lot of very talented staff members, and we also have a lot of staff members who are new. So coming in, there's going to be certain departments that have a lot of that institutional knowledge, and then there's going to be other departments where they're just building the foundation of their tenure here in Palmer. So they might need additional support to become, the best versions of themselves and provide the best service for Palmer. How would you go about providing an environment where these employees are able to thrive and provide the best service for the community?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we had the same thing in Plymouth, new division heads, new department heads quite a bit. And it's really being open and having a consistent meeting with them scheduled to kind of make them feel welcome to the town and feel that they're supported. I think that was a big change I think that I had in Plymouth was a lot of the department heads felt like they never really wanted to go to the town manager's office in the prior administration. And changing that culture and mindset of being welcoming and knowing that you're going to get supported by your town manager is kind of appreciated by them.
Can you give an example of how you empower your department heads?
Yeah, so they're the technical experts. Sometimes they come in and they do not have the customer service skills. So I've had a couple different issues where they've come in with dealing with residents or business owners, and they were having a conflict because they couldn't communicate. They were so caught up in the black and white of the policy or procedure that they were supposed to follow that they couldn't relate to the business owner. And I was able to step in and say, well, this is how you should approach them. Not everyone views this as black and white, and that your approach on them really needs to change you need to work with them, not against them, and kind of foster that and sit in a meeting that all take the lead on that conversation so they can see how to approach people differently from what they were accustomed to. So again, it's just anytime they need me, I'm available, but sometimes just knowing that is comfortable enough for them to.
Now, what if you found yourself with a department head who didn't necessarily have all of the technical expertise that they needed?
Yeah, again, it's talking about really addressing it, being honest with them and saying, hey, look, this is where your focus area needs to be, whether that's through goal setting or if there's a glaring issue that we got missed during goal setting that we need to discuss right away. Really talk about, is there professional development available? Is there someone internally who I know you can work with, and can I connect you with them so you can have a meeting every week, whatever it is, to build that skill that you're missing?
Mm-hmm.
So how about fixing, or I shouldn't say fixing, that implies there's a problem, improving morale? Like say in a department, or maybe it's across departments, department heads, how would you go about taking a situation where we've got really low morale and trying to bring that back up to where they're not just, it's not just a pay thing, right? That's not the example. It's more just in general.
Yeah. So again, everyone's got different motivations along the way. Like you just mentioned, it's not always pay. Sometimes it's they like to get a thank you email after a meeting that they took the lead on. It's things like that. But really, I'd say we're successful in the morale turnaround in Plymouth because we were consistent, we were open, and everyone knew there was no secret agenda behind the scenes. People knew what our vision was, and we got them able to go on board with that and kind of move forward. So it's being consistent and constant and available to kind of bridge that gap that some people are afraid to. Some people don't want to go to the town manager because they view it as you're going to the principal's office, which isn't the case. But you want to have that. It takes time, and you have to build that trust.
Can you give an example of a morale issue that you had to deal with?
Yeah, I think I mentioned before, a lot of people were afraid to, if they had a problem with the resident or business owner, right, they were afraid to go to the town manager's office because before they would maybe just be brushed off, or they felt like they weren't going to get, they weren't being directly supported by the town manager's office. So bridging that and supporting them and addressing, even if I didn't agree with the conversation that happened in that meeting, pulling them afterwards and saying, hey, this is how you approach this. This is what you could do a little bit better next time. Think about it. I guess would be the answer to that question. Again, everyone's professional. Everyone's professional here. They want to be treated like professionals. And again, having that not in a berating way, but in an honest conversation of there's needs improvement here, and there's nothing wrong with that.
As a new town manager, can you describe your leadership style, but also your, like, how will you go about building your team?
Building team, give me a little bit more detail on that. So building my team in terms of like department heads, or building my team across the board?
Whichever you want to, however you want to, whatever you consider your team.
Okay. Can you repeat that question one more time?
Yep, so your leadership style, and then how you go about developing or working with your team.
So I actually just did this leadership style for my MBA program the other day. Where I identify on the whole scale of leadership styles is I'm a very situational leader. And what that means is how I kind of push my discussion topics or how I approach people really depends on who's in front of me. And what I mean by that is my delivery on things is varying by the individual. So getting to understand them, knowing their background. Mark, you mentioned before, like what their story is and where they came from and what their motivations are, is how I approach them. Because just like teaching, I learned this in my educational piece for my master's degree as well. Differentiated instruction is kind of differentiated delivery on discussion. And what I mean by that really is that how I come across to someone, I may speak to you a little bit differently than I would speak to you, Matt. The message is the same, but how it's delivered is in a way that you will understand it directly. So
just to build off that really quick, while we're talking about management style, what is the role, or what do you see the role as the council in your role as the town manager?
Yeah, we both need to be in sync. If it's going to be a solid working relationship, we both need to be in sync. We have to have the same vision alignment. We have to have the same goals set up. Not to say that we're never going to fully agree on everything, because it's never the case. But having that shared vision and shared kind of approach on things is really where you need to be aligned. But Barbara, I didn't finish your question. So the last piece on that,
Sorry.
I would say, say again? Oh.
I said sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. The last piece on that is I'm a big advocate of, I can work with you on technical skills. I want someone who has people skills. And that's who I look for in my hiring practices is if you don't have soft people skills, it takes a lot to train someone that. And to me, that's what I look for someone walking in. If you have solid customer service skills, solid people skills, and you're lacking on some of the technical pieces, we can get you PD. I'll work with you on that if it's something that I have knowledge on. But again, finding the core people that can communicate well and have the soft skills for dealing with customers across the board. You guys know how it goes. Not everyone's a happy tax-paying customer that comes in the collector's office. Having someone that can handle that interaction that may not be a positive one is key. Because again, that's your front-facing people, and I want that on my team to be able to communicate effectively.
So while we're talking about staff too, efficiency, just using the word efficiency and how would that relate to your staff here at Town Hall?
Say it again.
Efficiency.
Yeah.
Meaning efficiency as in, so town government, right? We serve the community. So as in efficiency, as in more or less along the lines of lean. I'm in the private sector, so leaning out certain processes here at Town Hall to streamline services for the benefit of the taxpayer.
Gotcha. No, that's a good question. So one of my goals when I came over from the school to the town side was to really look at all of our processes and figure out where we eliminated a position in the town manager's office, so we had one less set of hands to kind of deal with the day-to-day stuff. So we looked at was all of our processes that came up for discussion at any given point that I was involved in. I really looked at it holistically and said, are we really needed in this? Because is there a better way of doing business? And we were able to eliminate a lot of different departments, not just the town manager. It was across the board on a lot of things. Of some departments were middle management on things that didn't need to have happen in the process. So analyzing that, redefining it, and streamlining it to offer a better product for the businesses, this is the key one for me, made a lot of sense. And it helped them because Plymouth was known as a town that was tough to do business in. And again, streamlining a lot of that, whether it was through permitting, general alcohol licenses, any type of license you could think of, we looked at and said, how can we better define this so there's not so many hoops to jump through along the way. Yeah.
So what do you see as your first, say, 3 months in the position?
Where will you guys be when are you guys approving the budget? Just out of curiosity, do you have like June? So depending on my hire date, it would be getting right involved in that right away. But the first 3 months is really, I have I have a very good idea of where I think a lot of the department heads sit. And I think it's just talking to them, seeing where they feel the problem areas are, getting a catalog of that, and then figuring out my plan of I don't know, for lack of a better term, attack, and how do we combat that and fix that if there's an issue that they want to have addressed.
And how do you communicate with the council?
Yeah. So right now, my role in Plymouth is there's things that I broadcast to everyone, but also there's some things that don't meet the level. So understanding every counselor's needs on what they want to see really is a good tool for me to understand that, again, there may be something that you're very closely involved in that you want to know right away. But another counselor may say, no, I'm all set with that. You don't need to let me know or keep me in the loop on that. So finding really where everyone stands on that and the what information you guys want. But again, going back to, there's things that I'll always send to the board just so everyone's in the know and keep everyone in the loop on. But without, again, once I get in here and understand everyone's kind of what information they want, that's how I relay it.
So is that via email or via manager reports to the council? Or?
All the above, and phone calls too when there's pressing needs that you guys need to be in the know on. Yep.
I think that communication also is like a public communication that we need to.
Yeah, you guys remember from in my first initial interview, I think there's a lot of good that happens in Palmer, and this happens in every town. It just is, it's not broadcasted. How do we show the quality things that are going on, whether it's in the school department, the municipal side of government? How do we showcase that? And I had mentioned possibly there's two different things that I want to push. Is I try to start this in Plymouth. It's in the beginning stages, but I want every department at least once a year to come in front of the board to talk about really what's going on. There's a lot of disconnect sometimes that departments feel with the board that it can easily be addressed if they come in once a year, twice a year, and give you guys an update of where things stand, because it's good to showcase to the community too. I remember I didn't know what the town clerk did really until I got into the municipal side of government. And there's a lot that goes on. And I want people to understand that. So having them come up and explain the elections that are going on and the numbers of, let's say, people that are opting to do mail-in voting, like just talk about that stuff so people understand what goes on in your department and kind of the volume that happens day to day. So I think that's one key. I also think maybe like a quarterly, I would say monthly, but monthly is a little bit of a heavy lift, a quarterly newsletter to kind of show what's going on in town, what's forecasted, what are the big events in the next 3 months, to try to press and get community involvement. Again, there comes a cost with that usually. But is that money well spent? I probably think so.
How do you utilize Facebook?
So we're in the process of trying to hire a communications manager, director. We have our department heads send out, there's like a template that we send out that they'll fill in the blank if it's noteworthy to put on the Facebook page. But Plymouth, we have acknowledged that we are underutilizing a lot of our communications, and we're addressing that by trying to hire a staff member to push out really all the positive things that go on.
How would you do that here without a staff member?
Because I was going to say that's you.
That's fine. That's fine. But again, it goes to me. It goes to the same thing of finding out what
hire
level
himself
of
for 2
information
jobs?
you want to push online, because there's a different criteria. Some people think that I don't know. There could be a low-level thing that really isn't. You don't want to. It's like the robocalls that you get at home. Like, I know it's going to snow. I don't need the AIC still calling me, telling me that there's a snow parking ban. Like, those get old after a while. So being specific on what we put out is great. But I would say I'd probably want like a form template sent that our division heads or department heads would put in the key information on. And then I would look at kind of bringing that all together and putting that out as a document that people could follow.
What's your opinion of town websites?
We just invested a lot of time and energy and money into Plymouth, and I would say it was a great return on investment. Now, the question becomes, I'd want to see the numbers to say how many hits are you guys getting on a day-to-day, because it's a big investment if you're looking to revitalize and revamp your website. But if the numbers don't make sense, you probably have somewhere else that's pressing for money that I would say you want to spend the $20,000, $30,000 on. But again, the website can be used for information to push on.
Or you may find the website is underutilized because it
Because
doesn't
it's
have
so
information to look
So
at.
poor, right?
That was going to be
So
my
is
comment.
that worth, that's discussion for the board. Is that
Right.
worth the investment?
But
have
do
to make
you,
it to
so
it.
you do push out a lot of information through the
do.
website?
We do. Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, there's a lot of resources other than spending money on a private firm to do that. So from a council perspective, I'd love to see all options on the table at some point. Just throwing it out there.
I've always said there's a lot you can do. I don't know with Pathfinder offers if they have like a web service thing, but I mean, you could work with them. You could get the kids to kind of work on that and build behind. There's a million different things to solve a lot of problems we have here without spending money. So I'm with you.
So money.
Yep, I was about to.
You just segued right into finance. So.
So you had already touched upon the fact that finances are your strong suit. So I guess if you could just kind of explain your specific role in the budget process.
Sure.
And then also talk about like the components of a budget and what components are built into your budget presentation, documents, etc.
Yeah, so my role really is working closely with the finance director and the town manager. We do everything super early in Plymouth, unfortunately, because our budgets are actually set before we even get state aid numbers. Again, it's by charter, it's not by choice. So to follow that and with what's in the charter, we have to make a lot of trend history and kind of best guesses and estimates. So that process, again, starts with town manager, myself, and the finance director, really looking at trend history and just basic what we're projecting for revenues for next year. That's where it starts. From there, we all agree. We'll talk about numbers. Usually, it's kind of a back and forth. The finance director is very conservative on things like new growth, as they should be, and the town manager pushes them a little bit, and there we find that happy medium that everyone can agree to. From there, we'll have a subcommittee meeting with administration and finance committee members. It's usually the chair and vice chair, the select board chair and vice chair, and then with the school department, because you guys know the school department takes up the majority of your largest portion of the budget. We go over what the priorities are, what we're looking at, and what we're estimating for forecasts, and really what that breakup is between the town and school to build and use for your base for your building of the budget. From there, we relay that on the town side we'll have that at a staff meeting, roll out what we're looking at for money, kind of gauge their priorities and where they're looking, and say, there's a lot of moving parts to this, but also prior to that piece, we've gone over the select board's goals with the department heads, and we tell them to incorporate that into your budget process, because that's what we're trying to build on for next year. Now, it's always a challenge because a lot of people don't want to review and say, a lot of our new goals and initiatives come at the cost of doing business somewhere else if we're to put them forward. And it's having that conversation of really what's the priority? Do we want to move forward with this goal, or do we want to stay status quo with something here? But that all gets hashed out in our budget subcommittee meetings that we have between myself, town manager, and finance director. We go over every department's individual budget with a department head, and they kind of put together, I think I sent you the My Story thing. They put that out. They build that into their goals and talk about really trends in their budget, volume of calls for the police department. Let's use that as an example. Things like that that tells their story. From there, we talk about really, are we going to eliminate some things from their budget to bring it back down to where we feel is the baseline number, or do we leave it in there? And from there, that number is presented. Once that all gets finalized, that's presented to the select board for approval, and that's the number that gets pushed to A&F. A&F plays a very strong role in Plymouth. Their numbers of what they actually support for the budget is what goes into the budget document itself and into the warrant at town meeting. So there's a lot of moving parts on that even though the town manager may push that we want this position, ultimately A&F can reduce that and eliminate a position, let's say, if that's what was added in. Wow. And again, my position is heavily involved in that. Different from prior assistants, because given that was my strong suit, they've put me into that position to really work closely with the finance director on that.
Capital budget?
Capital budget. So we went from, that was one of my goals my first year, was going from working with the finance director as well, but going from a 5-year plan to a 10-year. So we were able to accomplish that. We have a 10-year forecast. We can either come close to affording everything that's on the 10-year forecast. So one of my goals was long-term was to I want to create a balanced 10-year forecast so people know where things are probably going to fall, which means some things fall off, but list them below the balanced 10-year. So you don't want to surprise FinCom, or I shouldn't say FinCom. There's a subcommittee for capital. You don't want to surprise them with projects that they've never seen before, but if it doesn't fit into the balance piece, it needs to still be aligned somewhere and noted somewhere so you don't have surprises that pop up. So
How do you fund the capital plan?
free cash. Yep. And some through debt service too. But the majority is all free cash. And we revitalized a couple different policies and procedures to get back to you guys know COVID kind of changed how we did things with money. So we had to not grab and use that for operating costs, but we grabbed a lot of stabilization to offset some things that we're now funding again through free cash to build those levels back up.
How much free cash do you guys generate a year?
Anywhere from 10 to 15 million.
And what's your capital budget per year?
Right around 10. So we built it at 10. So that's why it's capital usually comes in, I shouldn't say 10, it's usually 12 to 15, and that's what we're estimating out for the course of our 10-year plan. But after you back out different, putting X amount of money into general stabilization to build it back up to 5%, that usually leaves us with right around $10 million to spend on projects.
And then you're leaving like $5 million to carry over to the next year?
Yeah, I think we carry over 10% right off the bat.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, in the budget scheme, if I could, use the track. We just got track all taken care of and built and stuff. And we obviously have Burley Park. How do you incorporate into your budget to get it so, to keep something up to par to where it's not going to be something has to be totally rebuilt. It's just gotten to so terrible shape
No, again, and that's a very good question, because I feel like everywhere I've worked, they've kind of paid as you go, and there's not always money to pay as you go. And that's what's so important about a capital plan. So I've been a big kind of advocate for the day you buy something, you should have it planned out that the replacement cycle, let's say it's a new vehicle that's going to last you 10 years, a DPW truck. You should have that outlined and funded in your capital plan in 10 years. Now, is that always going to work out? No, because again, there's only so much money to go around, but having at least some money put aside for that so it's in that account really gets you at least somewhere on that. And it's a different mindset of capital funding, which I've never actually implemented anywhere. But to me, if you put away $10,000 every year for, again, I'll just use like a fire truck, for example. If you know that fire truck lasts you 10 years and it's only $100,000, there's no fire truck that costs $100,000, but again, just using it for numbers purposes. If you put aside $10,000 every year into that capital plan for that, in year 10, you're going to have the money behind it. It's a change because some people want to buy that item right away. But to me, it's kind of like how I personally finance your own home. You know things are coming down the line, so having a deposit for where the money should go, so you have something to cover it, would be good.
So are you setting that money aside like in a stabilization fund every year?
You could, yeah.
Is that what you're doing?
No one's. We haven't implemented this
Okay.
anywhere I've worked.
So how?
This is my.
Okay.
This is my thinking of how I would like to fund a capital budget.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, whether it's in stabilization, or you have, if you have the item that you can keep putting money into, like if it's a capital article that you can replenish, so you always have a balance that carries forward. That'd be my way of talking about it. And again, there's different ways to do it, but that's always been my thought. You should start storing money away right away.
Right, so stabilization, capital stabilization.
General state, yeah. Okay. And Plymouth implemented a facilities capital stabilization fund that we're still trying to figure out how to best utilize because there's so many pressing needs, and we're in a fine balancing act of do you spend $10 million to get a new building that's going to last you 50 years, or do you put a Band-Aid on it for 5 that's only going to get you 25? Like that's the constant battle that we're in.
So some of the challenges financially, obviously, are, a lot of infrastructure improvements that are needed. So, multiple bridges. So, we fixed one bridge with a truss bridge that should be opening very soon. But then right down the road, there's another bridge that's in disrepair. We have a lot of expenditures at our wastewater treatment plant with a very small amount of residents that you have that are on the sewer system. So, how do you address those type of things?
Everyone is so specific and individual that, again, they all vary on how you would address them, from my personal opinion. But really, number one is try to find grants. That's the number one piece, and that's what we try to do in Plymouth. If we know there's a capital project that really doesn't fit into our capital plan, we have a grant writer in Plymouth who really focuses in on that and tries to find a grant that matches that to help offset what that capital cost is. So again, without crunching the numbers and saying, really, this is what the outlook looks for the ratepayer, you got to imagine it's probably not great based on the numbers I heard. But again, it's finding that what that cost really is, and it's a balancing act too, because really, we're in the same process in Plymouth with our water. We're trying to conserve water and put in place a rate study that we're going through right now and charge more in the summer, which is great, but that still doesn't offset your long-term capital need that we need to grow and have a balance for. So it's finding that balancing act of really what is fair to charge the taxpayer for a rate and really what's going to cover your capital needs. So you're not sitting here with a massive capital need when you only have 100 rate, again, not saying you have 100 ratepayers, but a small amount of ratepayers.
Yeah, I think the breakdown is we have about $90 million of upgrades that need to happen within the next 10 years, and 1,200
people.
ratepayers.
And my wife won't let me put an outhouse in, so.
Yeah. I think their budget's about $3.5 million right now, and almost $1 million of that is already going to debt service. So,
Gotcha.
just to paint a little picture.
Gotcha.
So let's segue into grants since you
Just
brought
going to
it up.
follow up on that.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead then. You ask.
So I know you just mentioned that in Plymouth there's a grant writer. So obviously in Palmer we don't have a grant writer.
I thought you guys did.
What is your role, or what has your role been in your past history in grant writing? Do you have experience?
I do. So again, wearing every hat, I was the grant writer for the Palmer schools. I did a lot of grants in Carver as well. A lot of them were entitlements for DESE, but I did apply and get a couple competitive grants. Again, it's working collaboratively with the division heads and the department heads, because again, they're the technical experts that help me put the keywords that the grant reviewers are probably looking for. But again, building the fundamentals, putting your demographics, what your target areas are of need. I've worked with that, and I've actually been the submitter of quite a few grants. In Carver specific, there was a big push with DESE, and these were all competitive grants for career and community readiness. And we brought in, we were able to apply for it, and we got approved to expand our culinary program, again, through competitive grants. So I've had...
So you have history.
Correct,
Yes.
exactly, yeah. Because, again, I go back to Palmer, I was the only person that wrote the grants, even for the curriculum side.
Nice.
What type of success have you had with grant writing, not on the school side?
Again, we've had the grant writer on my town side, so I haven't really written any grants directly. But we went for a big project that I helped out with. We have a phenomenal grant writer. We went for a thermal school. We're in needs of a couple school buildings in Plymouth. We tried to get all net zero school funded by, I think there was federal money that we put in for. And unfortunately, I don't think we met the demographic that they were looking for. So we did not get that funding. But on a day-to-day basis, Plymouth does very well with grants and working with the state legislator on getting earmarks and things like that.
So I just want to ask a question. As part of the information that we were provided for reference comments on you, so one of the comments had to do with the help you provided to Palmer Public Schools when they had the interim superintendent last year, right? And so I was just interested in what your role actually was, because one of the things that has become apparent is that they used ESSER funds to actually
Hire staff
to use it for operating expenses. And now that it appears, which we'll know more as we get the budget, so we're still in our early stages of, we haven't seen the budget numbers yet.
Yeah.
We get those for March 1st.
Yeah.
But it appears to me that we have an ESSER cliff.
Yeah.
So
Everyone's in the same boat. Plymouth's in the same boat. So I don't know. I haven't looked, honestly, at FY25 school budget, but building FY24, there was an offset built in. Again, I'm going off memory here because it's been a while now, but there was a budget offset built in for a lot of positions that were added during COVID. It's the same thing across the board, though. Schools should realize that there is a cliff to that money, and that when that money goes, if you want to keep what you put into place for positions during that, again, it comes at the cost of something else. So it's weighing those out. And again, I don't know the FY25 school budget, so I don't know if that's what they're actually putting forward. But FY24, I do think we built off ESSER funds for staffing. I know there was at least supply money. So I helped them develop FY24's budget, yes.
Okay.
I also helped kind of reconcile grants, really provide any kind of information they needed, help them prepare for contract negotiations with the teachers, things like that.
Okay.
So, but yeah, every school is in this dilemma right now. And again, you've had a change in administration over there, but the goal should always be, when the grant ends, what goes along with it, the money's not there anymore. So if you want to keep what you have in place for those, and again, they're all good things. I remember in Plymouth that we put in a lot of social emotional coaches. Kids needed that. Now we're past the pandemic. If that's still a need, you can fund that. But again, that may mean you have to cut another program or another option that you offered prior to it to balance the budget.
So you just touched on,
5 or 6 things.
I think contracts. Should we talk about? I think contracts came up.
Can I-
Go ahead. Yeah.
what you were just discussing, say you come in as a town manager, how are you going to soften the landing from the cliff that they have climbed?
Again, without knowing.
You know,
Go back
from
to-
our side, because I
Yeah.
mean, we have to finally come up with a number to say, yeah, or we say, you guys climbed that cliff. Now, what was
So-
what was the idea of how you were going to land?
So the conversation is very specific on how big that cliff is. Because if that cliff's only $30,000, again, without knowing the
Right.
budget, I don't know. So it comes down to the situational leadership that conversation, I don't know how it's going to go without knowing what that cliff is.
So conversation is huge, right? But I think the last time they came before us was 200,000 this year.
That was for the
The school committee came and spoke about
right,
that.
but that was the circuit breaker, but that got funded by the state.
Yeah, so that
It was very
I was part of that
contentious.
conversation.
Okay, because it's a very contentious
Yes.
discussion as
I was
to
part of that
town's
conversation.
not giving us money to XYZ, and we're sitting here like, you shouldn't have spent the money on that. Oh, we didn't.
Yeah, I don't. Again, I only know what I know.
Right.
And part of that request that they were short by 200,000 was from OSD costs that the school really has no control on. If the state tells you that the tuitions are going up by 15%, you got to pay it. There's no weight in that.
School needs to figure out how to
They
pay
do.
it,
They
not
do.
Town. Yet.
Correct. But if there's a way, I would say that I wouldn't turn the school away on that. If there was a way that you had one-time money to help fund that, Cliff, for that 1 year, the OSD, the tuition money is reimbursed through circuit breaker. It's just a year behind.
Yeah, we had that conversation. Yeah, we told them that we had no problem if it didn't get funded by giving them that money, but it got funded, so they never came back.
But again, I don't want to dive too
No,
deep.
no,
into
yeah,
this
yeah,
because
right.
No,
Yeah, I was
know.
just trying to ask the question of,
that money that the school gets back is a year later. So they would have to cut $200,000 from their budget in FY24 with money that's going to be reimbursed in FY25. So if we're able to work with them and give them a one-time fund to get them through FY24, they didn't have to cut $200,000 from their budget. I'd say that's a conversation that we should have and talk about. Do we have the money to do it?
Somehow they found it because they never came back.
Yeah, they could have
Anyways.
used. They honestly could have used extra money. I
Right.
was
Yeah,
not
I
part
just-
of the final
Right.
budget.
We understand it. Yeah.
And watching the last couple school committees, they're looking to hire more staff this year.
Okay, so as far as contract negotiations,
Yes, I've been heavily involved everywhere I've been. That's actually where I met the town rep that kind of pulled me over to the school side, from the school side to the town side was through collective bargaining with the
Okay.
teachers. They liked my approach. They liked how I delivered things, my consistency. Yes, I've been heavily involved in collective bargaining through every position I've held.
okay.
I've been the lead finance and even in Palmer, actually, every superintendent's degree of what they wanted involvement was varying, and I actually became kind of the lead negotiator in Palmer for a couple of our associations.
Have you ever been to arbitration or mediation?
I have
Successful or,
the one arbitration case that we've been to in Plymouth, which is huge. Prior to me arriving in Plymouth, there was over 20 arbitration hearings, the cases that got brought forward. Since I was hired with the new administration, again, it's not just me pushing this. We only had gone to arbitration once in my 22 months of being in the town side. So I thought that was a positive that, again, we changed culture and how we work with people, not against people. But that, I would say that was a 50-50 arbitration case that neither side really won.
okay. How about grievances?
Yep. So I'm the grievance officer for Plymouth. So again, that's where I try to resolve everything before it gets to arbitration.
Right, right.
And there are a few. I would say I probably have one hearing a month. I would say, and again, that's significantly down from where it was because I have meetings every couple weeks with the unions to try to get ahead of every issue that may become an issue that they would file agreements normally on to address it.
If I could just bounce back to finance for 1 minute. Have you done anything creative when it comes to finances to save money in different areas?
Yeah, so in Carver, I view Carver very similar to Palmer. We had to look at consolidating and doing shared services to save a decent amount of money. So we did that in IT and facilities. Again, it's always
Was that with the school department or another town?
It was with the school department.
Okay.
It was school and town. That was in Carver. In Plymouth, this really wasn't a money savings, but it more or less was a process. I worked with the fire and police chiefs on regionalizing dispatch. So it kind of is regionalizing. There's not really a regional. We kind of co-opt with the county sheriff's department that they run all of our operations now for dispatch.
And I'm sorry, what town was that in?
In Plymouth.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. And again, there really wasn't a cost savings, but it was more or less a better delivery of service to the residents.
Did you have a question, Phil?
Yeah. How important do you feel that you're talking about IT persons and this and that to have, say, like a full-time regional IT person to help all
In-house, you mean?
right to in-house?
Yeah, like have a person that's
right. They
assigned,
take
yeah.
care of all the different facilities. You know.
Yeah,
And
I would say that is huge for the town, and I think you guys still contract out.
We do.
Yep.
Okay,
But there's
So-
been talks that we would like to see, right? You know.
Don't,
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been talk about consolidation. You can just put it out there. I think that makes
job,
sense
Phil.
because
Tell
a
them
lot
to
of
shut up.
times, again, this now brings me back flashbacks. And you may not have a Munis expert, but I remember having issues with Munis in Plymouth in Palmer on the school side, and I had to put a ticket in, and sometimes that took over a day to get resolved.
Okay, so good luck, buddy, because
I was
now
like,
it's
that's on
about
the
a
short
month.
end. A day is a good thing at this point.
okay, so you're feeling it is a
Absolutely. If you have a staff member who they can go to, you should. Anytime you can have a staff member over contracting out, I think you should do that because again, it's a face that people are comfortable with, and they feel like they're. Even if I'd rather talk to you, Phil, and say, you tell me, Brad, I'll be with you by the end of the day, than get a ticket that sits in that I'm not getting an update on of where it stands.
okay.
But the offset to that is that putting somebody on the payroll means benefits
Benefits and everything else,
things
yeah.
like that, which could sometimes outweigh the cost of the outside service that we're having, plus the outside service that you're getting 24-hour service for. And I'm not going either way. I'm just saying that we've had this conversation. We've gone back and forth. So
Which do you
Right.
feel is better?
I would say for the town, if the school is going to stay, if the school is looking to consolidate on that and kind of do a shared service, you should have that staff member. Because I think expanding that, again, I don't know the whole needs, but my guess is if you looked at what you spent here on the town side and you added on a part-time staff member on the school side to get one whole body, you probably could cover what both are maybe outsourcing and spending. Again, it's a
conversation.
It's all a
Right,
balance.
it's a balance, right.
Yep.
So let's talk about project management. So as you're aware, we have a number of different projects. We've talked about some of them already, but we have Commerce Middle School. We have a lot of upgrades at our wastewater treatment plant. We have the bridge repairs, the need for a new DPW facility, just to name a few.
Yep.
So could you talk about your direct experience with project management and what type of projects you've been involved with?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the school's experience first. So I've gone through, let's see here, 3 MSBA roof replacements in Plymouth, 1 emergency roof replacement that wasn't through MSBA in Plymouth, 1 new entire school build, elementary school in Carver, accelerator repair project in Carver for the middle high school, and then in Palmer, I was part of closing out a roof project at Commerce Middle School. I started like right in the last couple of days of closing that out. So I've been heavily involved in that. We actually also built a track and turf field in Carver that I was heavily involved in. So I've dealt in project management. I was on the technical team that usually met every week for all those projects and went through change orders and things like that. In the town side of Plymouth, there's a lot going on. We're actually going through, we had a DPW facility assessment done, and we looked at we got a quote for a $100 million complex. Again, doesn't fit into our long-term funding plan. So what we did was we kind of phased that out over 3 different phases. We're in the process right now, which I've been a lead role in, is kind of negotiating with an abutter that has a parcel of property to our DPW. So phase 1, just use numbers. Phase 1 was estimated at $20 million for the new build. we're looking at bringing forward to town meeting an article that is roughly, we're estimating anywhere from 12 to 14 million all in for that same facility for phase one. So we're able to reduce the $6 million to the taxpayer. No guarantee it's going to pass, but I've been heavily involved in that whole process and kind of starting the marketing plan to push that to town meeting so people are comfortable and have all their questions answered. We've done wastewater treatment plant upgrades, the water sewer interceptor. There's a lot of capital money spent in Plymouth that I've been a part of. Again, I'm a part of a team. I'm not the leader on all of these projects, but I will help assist the wastewater treatment plant operator if needed and things like that.
All right. So, master plan, do you have have you?
We're developing that right now. We actually got funding, I think in the fall town meeting. We had $400,000 set aside, and we actually had a state earmark for $80,000 that was part of the 9C cuts. So, but it's still moving forward.
What's your philosophy on once the master plan is done, then what?
It should align with really what the town moves forward with. I think it's the same as our goals. I mean, if you do all this work behind the scenes and put everything together, and if you just put it on the shelf for 20 years, that's, I think, what we're kind of dealing with in Plymouth. What was the money spent for? And really, was all that time and energy put into it really spent well? So it's using that as your guiding tool for a lot of conversations and budget building and priority building for the board.
And there's a master plan implementation committee here in town. So what would you see your role in working with them?
Very closely. I actually, again, this was part of working with the planning department. Actually, there's things that I never thought I would actually like getting involved in. I've kind of come to really enjoy. Prime example is I'm working with Plymouth has a lot of different small villages, kind of similar to Palmer, but they're more defined with a higher population total, obviously, in them. And there's a lot of gear towards community gardens and things like that. That if you asked me 5 years ago, I'm worried about the Red Sox and who they're playing on Thursday night. But now that's shifted where kind of getting into the detail on things and small things like that, I have a lot of appreciation for. That I go back to one of the properties I'm thinking of downtown Palmer that I drive by, that if you could put a community garden on, I think it's a home run. It drives people to your downtown area. It gets people involved. It gets foot traffic down there. And there's not a huge cost to that kind of stuff. So, again, I saw that as one of through reading some parts of the master plan that was in there, and I really like that because I'm dealing with that in Plymouth right now.
So how do you motivate employees?
Lead by example. Lead by example, I'd say, is number one. You want them to know that they can go to you for really any question they have. And I think that's where I've built a great rapport with everyone of, even though I'm not the technical expert on different problems they have, they know they can come to me and I'll be a soundboard for them to really talk about and address their approach on how they're going to address this issue. And I also like to think I've mentored a couple different people. I've mentored 3 school business managers now who were office staff that kind of moved up in the field. So it's kind of finding where everyone sits on where they want to be in their professional career and helping them obtain that. I really enjoy doing that. It's difficult because some people, I think about my boss right now. He hired me knowing he was in the same boat I was. He was put in to Plymouth as the assistant town manager back in 2015. He worked for 2 years and he was ready to move on. He viewed the same thing for me. It's tough because you want to build long-term relationships, you want to have consistency, but you also want to work with people because you want them to move on to their next step. And it's difficult for one of our department, to lose one of our department heads. It's tough, but if it makes sense for their professional career, you have to acknowledge that and support them in that goal.
So, go ahead.
Are we thinking the same question?
Probably.
Yeah. So on that note, what do you see as your long-term goals professionally?
Yeah. I feel like I've accomplished really a lot in this field, that I'm ready to take on the next step as the leader of the town. could stay in Plymouth. I just feel like the need for me, I'm a good fit for Palmer right now. I know everyone has a varying degree of, when you go through a transition and a leadership change, everyone has a different degree of what they need in that next leader. I feel like what Palmer needs from my assessment is a very good fit for my skill set. And right now, I think I'd be a great fit in Palmer. Now, long term, my goals here that I envision is probably a 6 to 10 year vision. To be honest with you, I want to see some things through that I know are going to take 6 to 10 years to accomplish. And I think that's good for you guys to build kind of sustainability for the next course. So just throw it out there. This isn't going to be a position that I'm in for 3 years and I'm moving on somewhere. I know if you look at my resume, I've spent 4 years most places, but following my trajectory, it was always for professional growth. I feel like I've capped out now, and I'm ready to take on the leadership role in a community. I have a house here. Again, I'm not looking to go really anywhere else.
If I was correct, December of this coming December, you'll have your master's, correct?
So I have my master's in education. I'll have my second master's for my MBA.
Okay.
Coming, hopefully, depending on schedule-wise, for December. I have one course left.
Okay. So I guess the question was, how do you juggle on that your school, and which ain't a bad thing, but with your job?
Yeah.
And
it's been no different. So as soon as I was hired in the school business manager world, I've never stopped going to school. Never stopped. I got my master's in education through Worcester State. I've continued on with Bridgewater. You make it work. And I'm so happy that I have one class left because I'm just done with school. It's a lot. It is a lot to balance, but I've always made it work.
So I just want to bounce back for a second to employee retention. So obviously, huge issue right now. And, I appreciate your comment regarding, sometimes people just need to leave for their future advancement. But, what steps would you take as a town manager to try to retain employees?
Again, it comes down to where they are in their professional career. You want people to buy into your vision and stay long term with you. But again, if you have someone who's ready to spread their wings and move on to the next step, I never want to hinder that. But having a solid bench and a succession plan lined up. I mean, we're dealing with the same thing in Plymouth right now. We have a few key department heads who have worked for over 20 plus years at the tail end of their career that probably have 1 or 2 years left. And thankfully we have money to afford this. Palmer may not be in this situation, but we're hiring essentially a deputy position for 1 year. So they have 1 year of transition work underneath, and that they'll take over when the time comes.
how would you deal with then if, let's say you see a pattern of it's just a department person is leaving for another place because job, pay, and everything is better.
Yeah, I would say
let's say that became, you found out that was the issue. How are you curing that?
I would ask, when was the last time the town did a class and comp study? Look at something like that to say, are we really in the ballpark of where the field is? And if they're able to get more money elsewhere, if you feel like your position is in line, then, I mean, you can't stop that. You can't stop that. But again, having a conversation with them we deal with this a lot in Plymouth. People will put in reclasses and we'll do a review and analysis of really where the market is. And we'll say, unfortunately, that's not the market. Sometimes you have to have that difficult decision. And sometimes it does prompt people to leave, unfortunately. And again, you can't, it's a balancing act. I go back, I always use that word, but the phrase, but you got to be consistent, because if you give, everyone's looking at how you roll everything else out. Now, if I give a $20,000 raise to one department because I don't want them to leave and it's higher than the market, I've now set that as the standard for everyone across the board.
Right, so I guess what I'm asking is how do you deal with a town is not in the proper market? So
it's working with the board to figure out, do we have the funding to adjust the market? And Plymouth went through this right before I started. They gave all employees a very sizable equity adjustment to get up to the market, because that was the problem. We still had a high turnover. And again, money doesn't solve every problem too. That's another takeaway from my professional career, is that money does not solve every single problem that you have for retention, but it certainly helps.
So, really quick, you keep using the term your vision, right? And trying to get people to see your vision. Just out of curiosity, how do you get people to see your vision? Like, what is the method that you use to get department heads or staff or even the council to see where your vision is?
Yeah, it's hard to explain. It's more or less you'll see it down the line, and how I respond to things, how I answer things, how I roll out things. It comes with time.
Okay.
It's
No,
not
just
easy
curious.
to like sit here and say this is my vision, but once you go through a couple years and you'll understand of where do you see like us going as a town, and that'll be my lead charge.
Got it. I get it. I understand. No, I was just curious. I mean, you said it numerous times that, your vision. So I'm just curious on how you're going to portray your vision.
Yeah.
And so everybody else can get on board.
Or
I think it's
for the council's
Right.
vision.
Yeah, I think it's the council, the goals.
Right.
That's
I
all.
got it. Yeah.
And again, staying the course on that. You're only like, I've worked with some managers who, great people, but they're inconsistent on where they fall on things. If you're consistent with it, then you'll build that vision.
Right. Change the plan, never the goal.
Exactly.
Right.
When you say that, I guess I'm a little unclear. It takes time to. Does it take time to tell us what your vision is, or does it take time to get people to
See
buy
it.
into the vision?
Right. To see the vision or
see
buy
the
the
vision.
vision. Right.
Yeah,
Because
it takes
you know,
time.
it's-
That's
okay.
yeah.
So,
it takes time.
so like if I would say to you, if we were to say to you tonight, what do you see as Palmer? I think that was one of our early questions. Is what would you like to accomplish as Palmer's town manager? That's
Right. And I asked that question. That's why I was following up on
Yeah,
it.
and it's
Yeah.
like
No, I want to change the perception of Palmer, and I'll be honest with you guys. A lot of my close friends have chosen not to move into Palmer, and I struggle with that because we all went to the high school. We all had the same course of our career. We all went through Palmer High School as seniors, and for them to come in and say, "Now I'm all set with Palmer. I'm going to go to Munson or Belchertown, a neighboring town." I want to change that mindset. And it's different reasons for everyone, but it's getting everyone to see what Palmer offers, and it's not as bad as what you may think and what they perceive, because that's the key. It's all perception. And
Perception is everything.
Exactly.
I think it's partially perception, but then also as a young person and like looking to continue to be established in Palmer, it's also housing. Like housing is a big issue in town as well, I think personally.
What availability?
Availability, that, the age of the housing stock, quality, those type of things. Like when you're, somebody who's looking to, whatever your long-term goals are, like that's just my observation.
We have a large absentee owner. It's a lot of rental
yeah.
property here.
Yeah.
So it's
I remember from my school days.
exactly.
Because that comes a lot of services that need to be provided. Yes, absolutely. Yep. I think it was 70-30 split. Does that sound right?
It's close.
Yeah.
Last I looked.
So I think just to add a little bit to the vision, right? So you have a vision coming in if you were hired, and then there's the reality, right? And so the reality is that probably, and again, then Matt will do his happy thing after I finish it's not all bad, and it isn't all bad, as you know.
Right.
But
You live here, so you know.
But the reality is that, you kind of touched on it earlier when you said, I go to work every day and I have nothing. I have nothing to, like, I think you said, like, on the list or whatever.
Sometimes there's nothing on my calendar.
Correct.
Yeah.
But then the whole day is full and you're there till 8 o'clock. So I understand that concept. But you have the vision of what you'd like to do if you were hired.
Yeah.
But then the reality is there's all these things that are outstanding that need to be addressed, and those really become the priorities because they haven't been addressed, right? So you kind of have to shift your vision to maybe, I mean, let's just say it's the first 6 months to a year that you're here, that you're getting things up to a point where then you can have a vision. So there's the things that are a vision that, yes, we agree, like things that have to get done, but they might not be your vision. So I guess my point with that is, are you able to accept that your vision might have to wait?
Yeah,
Because you've used the word vision quite a few times.
No, that's why
I agree. No,
I didn't even
no.
call you out on that either. I just,
No,
no.
it's a key word you keep using in your your responses.
But again, I don't think that vision has ever shelved. I think you still maintain that. It just may not be as fast as Bernie mentioned. May not be able to get to as many people. May have many meetings in local, like meetings at different different like sections of town. Let's say if that's like my focus area, to go talk with people at Depot Village in that target area. That stuff may have to wait, but it's never fully shelved. It just may not happen as fast as I want it to. So yes, it is a balance of current needs, but I would never want to just totally shut the door on continuing down the push of my vision and the plan.
So, hypothetically, right, if you were the town manager and you had all the resources in the world, what would the first thing you would do here? And this is just totally hypothetically. Like, what would you change in Palmer the first thing if you had all the resources in the world and you as a resident, because you live here, what would you do to make the town better?
Is the town, so I got a couple of questions on that. Is the town functioning? Is internal functions operating well or no? Because if it's not, then that's what I want to address. You can have everything you want in the world, but if your internal operations aren't sound, I always view it as the front and the back of the house. If your back of the house isn't squared away, you can show whatever you want in the front, but there's a fire behind the scenes that you got to put out.
Right, but saying everything's good, what's the first project that you as a town manager with unlimited resources would do for the town of Palmer? Just out of curiosity.
Meet with residents. I feel like there's a disconnect from the people I've talked to with really the board. They sometimes don't view the board as really representing the taxpayer and residents. It's meeting with them, figuring that out. Is there a communication breakdown of is there just, are we not communicating what the board does well or what the priorities of the board are to the taxpayer, and are the residents or taxpayers not relaying to the board really what the issues are as well? So that would be number one.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be right off the bat.
Gotcha.
Would be number one. Because again, you want people to view government in a positive light. And again, you're never going to solve everyone. Some people don't like paying taxes. It didn't matter whether it was $2 or $7,000. They're just not happy with what they get for services.
Right, and we all know in this room that there's a lot of keyboard cowboys out there that don't show up on monthly meetings at all, and just like to stir the pot. So we also know that too. Right.
So how do you get that message out in a society that doesn't read newspapers, and it's a dying business, whether, that if you want to read the paper online, you have to pay to read the articles because the ones you want to read are locked, which people, I don't think, do. They don't pick up the paper at the store. They don't pay attention to
The meeting.
meetings.
Yeah.
Everything is discussed on social media, right, wrong, or indifferent. And most people find out about things the day after it happens. So how do you address? I mean, because those are the frustrations, I think, of every town. This is not something unique to
I
Palmer.
was going to say.
No.
Bernie's like, what are you doing to this guy? Like,
No.
Exactly.
No, this is like
People don't want to get involved. They want to.
So this is just normal. This is the new norm, right? So how do you deal with those
So there's a
things?
small number of those that you're never going to solve. So you have to acknowledge that you're never going to solve every problem. But again, it comes back to try to communicate as best as possible, whether it's using your social media sites, or I go back to the community newsletter that you send out to every resident in Palmer. So you can say, hey, we told you 3 months ago that this was coming down the line. Or you can publish something that kind of gives a narrative of a project, or you can put your capital plan in there that shows where everything falls. Not everyone's going to read it, but again, it's another resource that you can say. They can't say, I didn't have to buy the paper. You can say, we provided this to you. I don't have internet. How can I go online? We provided it to you. So it's finding one source that you actually ensure that gets to them again, you can't guarantee that everyone's going to read it or care about it, but at least you can say, we've been consistent with this.
Anybody else have anything they wanted to ask? Did you have any questions for us?
No. Good.
Oh, I guess one more question is what type of notice do you have to give?
No. So again, I have a really, really good working relationship with my current boss. He always was aligned that, Brad, you're going to be for 2 years and then you're going to be a rock star somewhere else. So he's kind of we've been talking about this for a while now, of my essentially essential departure at some point. So getting through town meeting is huge, which is the first week of April. And then after that, we have a good plan in place that if I am to take a job somewhere, that we would be good to go.
So you have a deputy assistant manager in Plymouth?
That would be me.
I'm just kidding.
I got
So
your
are you,
joke.
so 30 days or less than 30 days?
30 days should be fine. Yeah. Again, I want to work with him to confirm that, but everything we've talked to this date, getting to town meeting, which is the first week of April, is key.
And I think that's admirable that
Ooh.
you would want to do that, so, yeah, definitely not something you want to just walk away from.
Exactly.
Okay, anything else? All right, well, thank you, Brad.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
All right, so that concludes our meeting. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good night.